I am Councilmember Althea Stevens, Chair of New York City Council Committee on Children and Youth. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank Commissioner Danzer for his years of dedicated service. We give him a round of applause too, because I be all clapping and stuff up in here, and not supposed to, but I think it is due for someone who has been a dedicated servant, leader, and administrator of the Children's Services. Over many years and across different divisions at ACS, he has shown a deep commitment to children and families of New York City. We are grateful for your leadership and the care he has brought to this work, and we wish him all the very best in his next chapter. We really appreciate the work that you've done. I mean, you could always tell when there's a provider leading agencies because the care that they bring to it. No shade to nobody else, but I have a special place in my heart for providers. Thank you for joining us today on our oversight hearing entitled Examining Racial Disparities in the Child Welfare System. We will also be considering the following 3 bills amending and advancing family rights, improving services for children, and involved in the child welfare system. Introduction 424, I don't know why I kept saying 424, sponsored by Councilmember Parina Sanchez, would require the Commissioner of Health and Mental Hygiene to establish and operate a pilot program providing free mental health services to children who've been returned to their homes following removal. Introduction 449, sponsored by myself, requiring child protective specialists to provide certain information verbally to parents or other legal responsible caregivers at the first point of contact during an investigation of an alleged child abuse or malnutrition. Introduction 466, sponsored by Councilmember Ung, which would require ACS to produce multilingual disclosures from a distinguished citywide languages and make it available during a child protective investigation on its website. For decades, oversight bodies advocated and impacted families have documented racial disparities in our child welfare system. Black and Latinx families are more likely to be reported to state central registry, more likely to be investigated, and more likely to experience a trauma of child removals and foster care placement. In 2021, ACS began implementing structural changes in part intended to confront these inequalities. These efforts included shifting towards family-based foster settings, strengthening preventative services, and expanding supports for parents and caregivers, enhancing mental health services, and reducing unnecessary reports through mandated reporting education. These efforts are commendable and represent important steps forward. However, ACS own data demonstrate that significant disparities persist. In fiscal year 2025, Black children were overrepresented in emergency removals and foster care entries compared to the share of SCR intakes. Hispanic children also continue to experience disproportionate involvement in key decision points. By contrast, white children were underrepresented in removals and foster care entries relative to their share of reports. These patterns raises serious questions about decision-making throughout the system and whether recent reforms are translating into more equitable outcomes. Today, we look forward to hearing from ACS about the progress being made, the measurable impact of those reforms, and additional steps needed to ensure fairness at steps within the child welfare system. The legislation being heard today builds on the agency's reform efforts and is intended to further support the city's shared goals of protecting children while strengthening and preserving families whenever it is safe to do so. I'd like to thank the committee staff for their hard work in preparing for this hearing, as well as all of my team back in the Sweet 16. I mean, they keep removing the names because I say that wrong, but I can say Elizabeth Arts. So thank you for your work. And Rhea, what's your last name? I don't know. What? Ogasawara. Oh, look at that. I said your name. Y'all can put your names back in. I could say the names. With that, I will turn it over to committee staff to swear in our first panel, and I believe Cora is our first panel. I know you've been here a long time, so we're going to get you in here so you can go. She had a hearing earlier today, too, so
Thank you. We will now hear testimony from the administration. Before we begin, I will administer the affirmation. Please raise your right hand. I will read the affirmation once, then call on you to respond. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Stevens and members of the Children and Youth Committee. My name is Linda Tajani, and I have the honor of serving as the Chair and Executive Director for the New York City Commission on Racial Equity. I lead CORE in partnership with 13 commissioners, and 15 staff members. New York City CORE is the product of a 2022 ballot measure to enshrine in the city charter a commitment to redressing longstanding racial disparities in power, access, and opportunity, enabled and perpetuated, whether by design, implementation, or impact through city law, regulation, policies, and practices. To approach this goal, the Racial Justice Commission proposed that a body be established for the purpose of holding government accountable for advancing racial equity and increasing community voices to influence city decision-making through the development of priorities for racial equity in government operation. New York City CORE exercises this accountability function first and foremost through oversight of a citywide racial equity plan outlining goals and strategies for reducing racial disparities in social and economic well-being. And we look forward to reviewing the plan developed by the Administration for Children's Services. Collectively, the 2022 charter amendments represent an understanding that the benefits and burdens of government policies are not evenly distributed across racial groups, and few systems illustrate these disparities as starkly as child welfare. In fulfilling its central mandate to propose equity priorities and outcome indicators based on needs identified by New Yorkers harmed by racism and social injustice, New York City CORE spoke with parents and children who experience ACS as punitive rather than supportive and driven by personal and institutional biases instead of genuine concerns for safety. To them, and I agree, the child welfare system is effectively a civil counterpart to the criminal legal system, both in the degree of discretion it affords and the potential for abuse of that authority. In fact, it was at the urging of community members that NYC CORE expanded a racial equity priority pertaining to holding law enforcement accountable for abuse of power and harm they commit to include child welfare personnel. Community members impacted by the system have reported not only being targeted for lacking the means to meet their children's needs, but also being profiled by virtue of their race, a perspective all too consistent with data revealing that almost 45% of Black and Latinx children experience an investigation by age 18, and that Black and Latinx families do account for 90% of system-involved families, despite constituting only 60% of the city's child population. By ACS's own account, Black families compared to other families were disproportionately separated, less likely to be mandated to receive additional services instead of removal, and experienced longer stays in the foster care system. The carceral approach taken by ACS can be traced back to chattel slavery, Jim Crow, and the legacy of slavery, which will be addressed in New York City CORE's forthcoming work in reparations, truth healing, and reconciliation. Although neglect allegations, which drive the vast share of cases, are meant to be reserved for parents who fail to provide for their children despite having the means to do so, families report being separated due to challenges meeting such basic needs as housing, food, and childcare. Meanwhile, funding that might support the fulfillment of these needs is invested in a foster care system that consistently yields negative mental health, education, and socioeconomic outcomes. New York City Core is also charged with responding to requests from City Council and other government officials, and we're honored to have been identified by former Deputy Mayor Ann Williams Isom as a government partner to Narrowing the Front Door Working Group in its efforts to advance the recommendations from its 2022 report on stemming the pipeline into the child welfare system. I'm pleased to share that these recommendations have recently yielded Resolution 153-2026, calling on the city to acknowledge the harm caused by a system conceded by ACS itself to be marred by racism and classism, and to commit to making more equitable policy and funding choices moving forward. As the city's racial equity oversight body, New York City Core is united with Narrowing the Front Door in the understanding that our government leaders, elected and non-elected, must acknowledge the city's role in perpetuating these harms and commit to a path of healing that truth-telling processes and restorative practices teach us is possible. To support this course correction, New York City Core joins Narrowing the Front Door in its call for a community-run accountability council, ideally established by law and funded by city government, entrusted with developing a roadmap for reducing family investigation and separation and investing in the health and well-being of Black and Latinx children and families, including those currently in the foster care system. Through such fact-gathering activities as data collection and analysis, focus groups, and public hearings, the council would identify corrective action steps and future initiatives to end the harms of the current system and redress past harms and prevent future harms. Finally, New York City Core echoes Narrowing the Front Door's recommendation that City Council support the provision of direct, unrestricted financial support to families independently of the child welfare system, hold ACS accountable for the racial disparities in the system and for the poor outcomes for youth in foster care, collaborate with advocates to develop agency data and budget transparency requirements, dismantle pipelines to the foster system that fuel racial disparities, including mandated reporter laws and hospital drug testing, use discretionary funds to support community-based services as a foundation for community and family-centered system of care, fund attorneys and advocates trained to support families with education issues, and pass the Parents Miranda's Bill requiring ACS to inform parents of their rights, including their right to an attorney at the start of an investigation. New York City Core thanks Chair Stevens for her stewardship of the latter bill, as well as Resolution 153-2026, and we look forward to working together to facilitate its swift passage. I close with an invitation to City Council, ACS, and City Hall to partner with New York City Core in its ongoing efforts to realize a city in which Black and Latinx children are raised by their parents and within their families, in a city where the Black family is honored, respected, and able to live a life filled with joy, peace, and prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to acknowledge Councilmember Felder, Williams, and Joseph. I have a couple of questions for you. What reforms are necessary to meaningfully reduce disparities in children removals and investigations? I know you mentioned some of them in your statement around like direct supports to families, but could you go in detail on what other reforms you believe would help with some of this work?
Sure. The statement goes into detail to uplift the reforms that were identified by Narrowing the Front Door. And I just want to first offer that those reforms take the center stage for CORE, one, because they were identified and created by people directly impacted, so parents and foster care families and institutions that work with people who are directly impacted by the system. Any reform that we move forward with as a city must center their voices. We have worked very closely with them to develop a accountability council that would be community-led, include 13 people, which would have representation from all 5 boroughs, as well as youth voice representation from all 5 boroughs, and really put power, access, and opportunity in the hands of those impacted to provide policy recommendations. And CORE would act as both the home of the council, so we would provide operational support and the funding would go through us, but we think that it is best and important and a sign of actually like true investment in Black and Latinx families that city government provide the full funding for this council. So we would bring together government leaders because we know that children go into the child welfare system, families go into the child welfare system by several pathways, everyone from schools to hospitals to Department of Probation to sometimes like our local counselors, right? And so we are taking a whole of government approach to ensure that the community members that would come on to the council through a public process would be directly supported by CORE, as well as narrowing the front door that they conceptualized this particular council, which to our understanding would be the first of its kind in the nation. And then they would develop the policy recommendations. They would look at the data with CORE staff. I also want to uplift the Miranda Rights Bill, which is essential for families. There's no reason anyone in this country should not be told what their rights are from the start of an investigation. It is an affront to both our constitutional rights as well as what we claim we are as a city in our New York City Charter. And I also want to uplift the support for provision of direct and unrestricted financial support. We see a lot of cases are coming through the pipeline, particularly because Black parents are being criminalized for being parents, and Black parents are being criminalized for being poor. And poverty is a systemic issue. We created it as a nation. We created it as a city. And so unrestricted funds that look like a universal basic income program for anyone who is experiencing struggle with respect to housing, food, or education is essential. And that would go so far as to ensuring that students who are experiencing investigations, families who are experiencing investigations, then have the actual support that they need to be the parents that they truly are, but the system is preventing them from being that.
And I know even in your recommendations, and I know you said like working with Narrow on the Front Door, and I think I heard you say something about like the youth. But how do you also make sure that young people's voices are also being heard? That is very important to me. And in this process, because I feel like a lot of times adults are often talking around young people, and they're also part of this process. And so how are they being integrated into this work? And how do we keep that separate and have the integrity of young people's voices to also guide this work in policymaking?
So, excuse me, hopefully when established, the Accountability Council will have 13 seats, 3 of which would be reserved for interdisciplinary experts, and then 10 will be reserved for 2 seats per borough, 1 seat for an adult and 1 seat for a young person. We are also going to be leveraging the community engagement process work that the New York City Commission on Racial Equity does for our own engagement. Right now, we've completed a second cycle that yielded just short of 10,000 voices, and those voices include people as young as 11 years old. And this particular topic and conversation was raised to CORE by the public in our first engagement cycle when we worked with 4,212 New Yorkers. And the way that community phrased it was they said, we want a CCRB, but for ACS. And then former Deputy Mayor Ann Williams-Isom introduced us to both Jess Dunhausner as well as Narrowing the Front Door. And Narrowing the Front Door shared that community members have already conceptualized what this can look like, and they needed a government partner. And that's really what CORE is set up to do. It's to be able to partner with members of the public, whether they're in an organization or not, and be able to bring the public solutions to public policy challenges to bear and bring government as well as community together. And we've been in conversation with ACS, We've gotten a lot of support from Commissioner Dunhauser, and we've worked hand in hand with Narrowing the Front Door. And the last thing I'll say is, in every single event we've done partnering with Narrowing the Front Door, young people have always been centered. Their youth voices have always been in the room. We did have a public session where we introduced the Accountability Council model to the public to say, before we bring this deeper into government, we wanted to make sure more community voices were a part of it. And young people were in the room and also participated and engaged and were asking the same questions you were asking. And so we went back in to say, well, we have a model that brings up youth voices. We also want to make sure that they are at the table to influence the decisions that the council will make.
Yeah, no, that's always going to be my first response, because in this work, people are always talking around children, and young people are never the ones kind of coming up with these solutions. And, we're supposed to support them. So that's always going to be something that I'm fighting for and pushing for and making sure is happening in government, because it happens all the time. So that's very important to me, and like a priority to make sure, especially as we're talking about bringing in community, that community is also young people, because we're always talking about diversity, but sometimes we figure that young people should be a part of that. My next question is, and I know my colleagues had a question as well. So what extent are poverty and housing instability and mandating reporting practices contributing to racial disparities in child welfare involvement? Do you have any statistics or any of those things because I know you guys have been working on that as well?
So I have the statistics that I had raised in my particular testimony, but I'm happy to follow up with a deeper report outlining what and how poverty is showing up in particular cases. I do just want to honor that folks, I know there are plenty of people who are also going to be testifying to that data. I think what's important to note is that there's a particular criminalization of poverty within the Black community that does not exist in other communities. And so it's both, well, where are we seeing our community members who are not able to make affordable housing prices, which we are now seeing are actually in no way, shape, or form affordable for New Yorkers, that when our families are being judged by their income, something that they really cannot control, prices that they're forced to pay also that they cannot control, there's an added piece of criminality that comes into the decision-making process. And that's not something that is new. This is, again, what we are seeing as a growth from chattel slavery to Jim Crow. Now we are living in the legacy of slavery. And so as the reforms are being made, we're really not thinking as critically as we can about what role poverty is playing in these decisions, and how are we looking at poverty differently from when it's a white family to when it's a Black family to when it's a Latinx family.
Is the commission examining the roles of other city agencies like DOE, NYPD, DYCD in contributing to the disproportionate reports of Black and Latinx families?
Yes, so those are some of the agencies that we imagine will be a part of the corresponding government council that will be working and hearing from the Accountability Council. And this is the whole of government approach. We also believe that OMB should be on that list. And any agency, which includes DYCD, that is working with a parent or with a child with a foster care institution. It includes agencies that work with preventative services, investigative services. And so we really do need the broader city government agencies at the table to do this work.
Since 2021, Foster Care Redesign, ACS has launched intensive initiatives including family enrichment centers, peer parent and advocates, extended therapeutic services, expansion of CARES track. From the commission's perspective, have any of the reforms measurable reduce racial disparities? And does the commission believe any of those strategies warrant further investigation or scaling up?
So we are in the process right now of doing further investigation on all of those strategies. I will say we have worked as a commission for the community equity priority process. We did work with family enrichment centers. We have spoken with the ACS leadership team about this work. But we also consistently go out and talk to community. And what I would like to raise is that we are hearing and seeing two very different things. I think we are seeing some of the data shifting very slightly, but shifting. And we are seeing policy reform. But when we go out and we talk to children and parents, that is not their experience of ACS, and it is not their experience of what it means to be Black and Latinx in community. And so what CORE is doing right now is looking to see how our community-centered research approach will be leveraged in the forthcoming Accountability Council, because we need to make both a clarity but also a bridge between what the data is telling us on a quantitative side and what communities are telling us that they experience. The last thing I'll note is that in our investigations, we have found that a consistent problem is that data is not made publicly. All of the data is not made publicly available, the data that we would need to be able to make these determinations. And that when data is made available, there is a lag between the data that should be coming to us right now and then the data that is produced by the city. That is not just on ACS, it is a citywide problem. But as we know, we need to be looking at the child welfare system as a whole of government approach that's been taken against Black and Latinx families that should be in support of Black and Latinx families. And so we need to look at the data across several agencies.
That makes sense. Does any of my colleagues have questions? I think everybody's good. All right. Well, that's all I have for this panel. Thank you for coming in today, and we appreciate your work.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
So we'll call our next panel, I believe, which is ACS.
Good afternoon. Panelists, please raise your right hand. I will read the affirmation once, then call on each of you individually to respond. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
I do.
I do.
I do.
Thank you.
I'm gonna let it slide, but you got like 35 pages here for your testimony.
A lot of them are data. A lot of
Okay.
it's data. It's not all.
I'm gonna let it slide because it's your last hearing with me. So
It's only 13 pages of actual testimony.
13 is a lot.
I'll go fast. I'll go fast.
But again, it's your last hearing, so I'm gonna let you do your thing.
Thank you, Chair Stevens. Good afternoon to Chair Stevens, Councilmember Joseph, Deputy Speaker Williams. My name is Jess Danhauser, and I'm honored and privileged to be the Commissioner of the Administration for Children's Services. I'm joined today by Wynette Saunders, the First Deputy Commissioner, Elvita Dominique, the Executive Director of Equity Strategies at ACS, and Ina Mendez, the Deputy Commissioner for Family Permanency Services. Thank you, Chair Stevens and members of the Children and Youth Committee for holding today's oversight hearing. Good to be with you as well, Councilmember Felder. Examining racial disparities in the child welfare system. This is a critically important topic and one that, as well as my team at ACS, have been focused on throughout my 4 years as ACS Commissioner. ACS's mission is to protect the children of New York City, a mission we take with the utmost seriousness. Over the last several years, having listened to youth and families with lived experience and learned a great deal from the pandemic, we've expanded our perspective on what this means. ACS is responsible for both ensuring children are safe in their homes and safe from harms that can come from unnecessary system involvement. In our effort to achieve both of these vital goals, we have carried out a comprehensive set of initiatives. As always, there is more to do. I think it is important to start by sharing the data with you. I'll walk you through some of the data, and we're also including data slides at the end of this testimony. As you know, if someone suspects a child is being abused or maltreated, they should make a report to the New York Statewide Central Register. When the state accepts a report about a New York City child, ACS responds to assess the safety of that child. In 2024, a Black child was 8 times more likely to be in an SCR report than a white child. A Hispanic child was 6 times more likely in an SCR report and investigation than a white child. More than 82% of the families experiencing an ACS child protection response were Black or Hispanic in 2024. In 2024, a Black child in investigation was 1.18 times more likely to be in an indicated investigation than a white child. A Hispanic child was 1.26 times more likely to be in an indicated investigation than a white child. These ratios have been stubbornly similar over many years. This is similar at every stage of involvement, including court involvement and placement in foster care. However, what has changed is that today, far fewer families are involved in a child protection response to an SCR report. The number declined 16% from 2017 to 2024, from about 51,000 to about 43,000. For Hispanic families, this was a 3% decrease. For Black families, this was a 19% decrease. For white families, this was a 25% decrease. And for Asian families, it was a 4% decrease. Even more dramatically, the number of families experienced an indicated investigation fell 46% between 2017 and 2024, from 19,361 to 10,420 families. For Hispanic families, this was a 36% decrease. For Black families, this was a 51% decrease. And for white families, this was a 56% decrease. For Asian families, it was a 41% decrease. This reduction in half is significant for families, as having an indicated case can have long-standing ramifications, including when seeking employment. Similarly, in that period, the number of families experiencing court-ordered supervision declined 63%, from 5,160 to about 1,900. For Hispanic families, this was a 55% decrease. For Black families, this was a 68% decrease. For white families, it was a 77% decrease. And for Asian families, this was a 68% decrease. And the number of court filings seeking foster care of abused and neglected children declined 37% from 2017 to 2024, from 1,959 to 1,227. For Black families, this was a 38% decrease. For Hispanic families, it was a 32% decrease. For white families, it was a 60% decrease. And for Asian families, it was a 44% decrease. In sum, we have significantly reduced the likelihood of unnecessary system involvement, yet serious disparities remain, which require continued urgent attention. Throughout my time as commissioner, we've been intentional about working to reduce unnecessary reports to the SCR, thus reducing unnecessary child protection responses, while increasing family access to community-based supports without the need for an SCR report. For the past 3 years, ACS has been working closely with other city agencies and systems to make better use of the state's child abuse and neglect hotline and to provide earlier and more effective support for families without the need for an SCR report or child protection response. Since January 2023, we've collaborated with New York City Public Schools, Health and Hospitals, Department of Homeless Services, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, the Mayor's Office to End Gender-Based Violence, and dozens of private hospitals, charter schools, and social service organizations to educate mandated reporters on how to help families get the help they might need without calling the child abuse hotline, except when children are truly not safe. In total, the ACS team has conducted over 435 presentations, reaching over 27,000 mandated reporters. Entitled The Evolving Focus of Child Welfare, Addressing Overreporting, and Providing Family-Centered Supports, the sessions provide guidance on when a report to the SCR is necessary and when it is not. We explain the shift underway in New York State, which has moved its messaging, thanks to advocacy from many in this room, to mandated reporters from when in doubt, call the SCR, to you can support a family without having to report a family when maltreatment is not suspected. Our sessions provide detailed information on ACS funded and other supports and services available for families in New York City and ways to build towards a culture shift from reporting to supporting families with successful engagement, relationship building, and access to services. Many sessions include presentations by local ACS funded community-based organizations. As a result, we have seen a reduction in reports and an increase in supports accessed without the SCR. For example, in the past 2 years, 2025 compared to 2023, SCR reports from schools have decreased by 16%, social service agencies by 16% as well, and health and mental health personnel, mostly in hospitals, by 7%. In 2025, ACS received approximately 5,000 fewer reports from these three sectors than it did in 2023. The ACS support line now receives more than 4,000 calls per year from families themselves and from schools and others who are working directly with families. Formally created in November 2023, the ACS support line has the sole purpose of supporting the community through engagement and connections to resources, prevention services, and/or concrete services. The support line now receives an average of more than 300 inquiries per month, up from about 30 monthly in early 2023. This increase is attributed to the ongoing work to ensure our community partners and families are made aware of how to access prevention services and other resources outside of the child welfare system in New York City. With regard to family support services, we've been very intentional about our efforts to ensure families and colleagues are accessing these services through community referrals and not just after a child protective investigation. These efforts are working, with more to do. Community referrals have increased from 12% of prevention referrals in January 2023 to 25% in December 2025. These past 4 years, we've also focused on efforts to provide services and supports to families as upstream as possible so that they never need to come into contact with the child protection system. This includes the launch of the school-based early support program, the expansion of low-income childcare vouchers, the expansion of family enrichment centers from 3 to 30 citywide, and our ongoing child safety campaigns, each of which I will briefly summarize. Launched in 2024, the school-based early support prevention model is aimed at providing families with services and supports as upstream as possible, preventing involvement with child protection while keeping children safe. Each of the 16 new programs are required to partner with at least 3 elementary and middle schools to help families address stressors that may impact their well-being, help families access concrete items, and strengthen social connections within the school communities. The model also includes a community pathway track that's funded solely by CTL that does not require opening a formal prevention case. Starting in 2022, ACS rapidly expanded childcare assistance for low-income families, providing vouchers that cover most or all of the cost of childcare. This initiative has made childcare affordable for thousands more families across New York City. Between the summer of 22 and the summer of 25, the number of children enrolled in care with the support of an ACS-issued low-income voucher climbed by 900%, from 7,400 to more than 75,000. During this period, ACS has also expanded access in communities historically underserved by the program, namely the 17 community districts with the highest poverty and unemployment rates that have faced inadequate access to childcare. The number from these neighborhoods enrolled in care with a low-income voucher increased from just 1,500 to nearly 22,000, a 1,300% increase. We also increased supports for families and communities by expanding family enrichment centers from 3 to 30. In fact, the contract for the 30th FEC just started this past January. As you know, FECs are welcoming family-centered spaces co-designed with parents, caregivers, and community members to be places where families with children come together. No 2 FECs are alike, as they reflect the culture, strengths, and identity of its neighborhood. The ACS Office of Child Safety and Injury Prevention focuses on reducing unintentional child injuries among children, such as safe sleep, medication safety, and window guards. The office is often out in communities sharing information and building awareness among caregivers and child-serving professionals. ACS does this work with an understanding that there can be fear associated with our involvement. In addition to significant efforts to make our services more accessible, ACS is supportive of efforts to create solutions outside of ACS that obviate the need for child protective involvement. In fact, it was going to be earlier today, but it'll be tomorrow, along with Deputy Mayor Arteaga and our colleagues at DOHMH. Luisa Linares is going to announce Strong Foundations, a new partnership with ACS, is providing the health department with $20 million over 3 years so they can expand and enhance clinical infrastructure and the continuum of perinatal, newborn, and early childhood services without the need for ACS involvement with the family. The funding will enable the health department to expand eligibility for nurse-family partnership, called NFPX, to pregnant people in their 3rd trimester and up until the birth of the child, and for those with more than 1 child, which has been a serious limitation before more families will be able to access this. The new partnership also expands capacity in their perinatal and early child mental health clinics and expands DOHMH training and technical assistance in perinatal mental health to build the capacity of the workforce. At the same time that we've been carrying out these efforts to reduce unnecessary system involvement, we've also been strengthening our child protective work in the vital effort to protect children from maltreatment and abuse. It is critical that our child protective staff have the tools and skills needed to identify those children truly in danger and connect families to services and supports and foster care if necessary so children can be safe. We have significantly reduced child protective caseloads to 7.6, which is well below national standards and enables CPS to have the time to provide each family with the attention they deserve. In the summer of 24, we added staff and units to the Family Preservation Program, which is an intensive child protection prevention model that enables children to remain safely at home while ACS works with the family to address immediate child safety concerns. FPP helps families by accompanying them to appointments, helping them navigate systems such as housing and school, and arranging for services such as homemaking or heavy-duty cleaning. We've also made sure that our CPS have access to those with expertise so they have the tools they need to best assess safety. For example, in the highest risk cases, CPS have coaches and access to investigative consultants who are former NYPD, as well as child advocacy centers to help assess for abuse. In January, we launched a new clinical support program where licensed professionals support frontline child protective staff with their expertise in mental health, substance abuse, and intimate partner violence. Through this newly enhanced program, this team of experts now engages directly with families and offers hands-on support and connections to services specific to each family's needs. We also have a number of quality assurance mechanisms in place to help us continually assess our practice and make enhancements when we see they are warranted. ChildStat is a weekly meeting focused on safety practice and child protection by looking at both data and randomly selected active cases from a different child protection bureau each week. The panel includes myself and other leadership from across the agency, typically with 700 plus staff in attendance, and is broadcast across the agency, promoting a culture of continuous learning and shared accountability. In 2025, we launched a new multidisciplinary review panel to bring experts external to ACS into our fatality review process to help identify systemic solutions to enhance ACS's ability to protect children and deliver high-quality services. This panel gives us a formal pathway to incorporate the expertise of members, such as those with lived experience and experts in mental health, substance abuse, homelessness, law enforcement, etc., into our policy and practice. The panel also aims to help New Yorkers better understand our work as we promote transparency and system accountability. We'll be incorporating the panel's recommendations into our annual fatality reports released each June. Another area where we see disparity is the length of time children spend in foster care. Black and Hispanic children placed in foster care are significantly more likely than white children in care to return home within their first year of placement. But once they've been in care for a full year or more, Black and Hispanic children are about 25% less likely to go home during that second or later year. ACS is working with its foster care providers and attorneys to reduce the length of time to permanency for all children, and we're seeing the number of long stayers in care drop steadily. From 2017 to 2025, we've had a 38% reduction in the number of children in foster care for 2 years or more, down from over 6,000 to just under 4,000. We have been intentional about our efforts to promote family reunification and safely end ACS involvement as quickly as possible. ACS launched a new technical assistance framework focused on permanency. The framework examines and utilizes agency-specific and macro-level data to identify best practices and inform business process improvements. These efforts are designed to support case practices to increase the likelihood children and youth can achieve safe and timely permanency. The Parents Empowering Parents program is where foster care agencies hire parent advocates with lived experience to be a member of their case planning teams. The parent advocates have a unique ability to build relationships with parents, offer guidance on how to navigate child welfare processes, and elevate parents' voices in the case planning process, all with the goal of supporting timely reunification. Truly listening to the voices of those with lived experience who have been directly impacted by the child welfare system has guided our work for the past 4 years. The Parent Advocacy Council helped inform our new discharge grant policy to better support families when children return home, both by increasing the amount of the grant to $2,000 per child, simplifying the application and reimbursement process, and expanding the items eligible for reimbursement. Voices of Youth in Care helped us develop and expand Fair Futures coaches and tutoring, the College Choice program now serving 460 youth, up from under 200 when we started, and our brand new Career Choice program for youth choosing vocational training or job readiness training. I will use this moment to say thank you to all the parents and youth who lived experience, who took the time and effort to open themselves up to me and the ACS team. I've learned so much from all those who opened up and shared their stories about the impact of ACS's interventions on their lives. Regarding the proposed legislation, Intro 424 to 2026 would require the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to establish and operate a program to provide mental health services for up to 1 year to children who have returned home from foster care, and then report to the Council on the pilot. ACS strongly agrees that when children and youth return to their families after foster care, they should have immediate access to mental health services without charge. Currently, when a child youth is discharged from foster care, there are provisions to enable continuity of services initiated while the child youth was in care. Specifically, they would be able to access all Medicaid services they were receiving while in care for up to a year, so long as the foster agency notifies the managed care plan of the discharge. Young adults ages 18 and older at discharge are eligible for Medicaid up to age 26. In addition, older youth exiting foster care have Fair Futures coaches who can connect them to support services up to age 26, and all families in need can access ACS-funded family support services. That all said, we do appreciate that there are often challenges for all children and youth in accessing mental health services. ACS looks forward to discussing this bill with the council. Intro 466-2026 and Intro 449-2026 require ACS to provide written and oral information to parents about a number of items, including their rights, at the start of a child protective investigation. ACS strongly supports providing parents with information about their rights at the start of a child protective investigation. While no state or city legislation has passed on this yet, for the past 2 years, we've been proactively providing parents upfront with information about their rights, that we need their permission to enter or family courts, that they can deny that, and that they have a right to call an attorney at the initial point of contact. Intro 466-2026 would require ACS to provide a multilingual disclosure form to parents and caretakers at the start of a CPS investigation, which would include information regarding parents' rights, resources available to parents, including legal services, and contact information for the Office of Advocacy. ACS is supportive of this legislation. ACS currently provides parents with information about their rights, as well as an information package with information about resources in their community, including contact information for legal representation. Intro 449-2026 lays out a proposal of information for child protection specialists to say verbally at the initial point of contact. While ACS strongly supports sharing information with parents about their rights, we have concerns about the specific language in the previously proposed legislation, which would equate the initial stages of a CPS investigation with an arrest and custodial interrogation, e.g. telling their parents they have a right to remain silent. We worry that this would both overly inhibit investigations in the safety of children and create fear that a conclusion has been reached before the investigation begins. We look forward to discussing these bills with the council so that we can agree on language that will ensure parents understand their rights while enabling ACS to assess child safety. As you can see from all this work, the team at ACS works hard each and every day to get it right for every single child and family who comes to our attention. Our job is to promote safety as holistically as possible, so children are safe and families have what they need, often from community supports outside of ACS, so that they can thrive. I'm grateful to the team at ACS for the compassion and conviction they bring to this complex and difficult work, and I remain deeply inspired by what they do. I'd be remiss if I did not take a moment to publicly thank Tyler James, ACS's Director of Race Equity Strategies, who was a remarkable leader, thought partner, and the force behind so much of this work. Tyler passed away this past January, and while his contributions to ACS and beyond remain with us, we miss him every day. And finally, a special thank you to the Council, the Children and Families Committee, and you, Chair Stevens, who successfully advocated for the creation of this committee. Your partnership, collaboration, tough questions, and oversight have made a tremendous difference for the children, youth, and families of New York City. Thank you.
Well, I want to go on record for saying again, thank you for the work that you've done. When I was given ACS under this committee, I had so much to learn, and honestly, your partnership was so instrumental in like helping me grasp the depth of what this agency has been. And so honestly, I'm truly feeling like I'm losing a partner in this work, but I'm sure you're gonna pop up somewhere, because that's how we do in this work. We just change positions, but always fighting for young people. So it's been a real honor to like work in collaboration with you. And I'm actually really sad that you're leaving me, but I'm gonna let go. I'm gonna start with some questions, just to even tie into some of Cora's testimony and something that I've stated a number of times around, like, I feel like you always had this vision and this guiding star to have this information as far as the racial disparities and, trying to narrow this work down. But it always felt like when you would testify, we would hear your vision and I would understand your vision. And when we meet, I would hear the vision. But then when sometimes you hear some of these numbers, there's a disconnect. Or when the families would come testify, there was like a disconnect. So I want to dive in a little bit into that. And like, according to ACS data, FY 2025, Black children represented 36.1% of the SCR intakes, yet they accounted for 43% of the emergency removals and 46% of the foster care entries. By contrast, white children accounted for 6.3% of intake and only 3% of emergency removals and 4% of foster care entries. What explains the the diversity in this? And after the investigation stage, what factors does ACS believe are driving the disproportionate impact of these racial decisions points?
Thanks, Chair Stevens. And the disparities absolutely require continued urgent attention. As I shared in my testimony, there's been a really great shrinking of system contact unnecessarily, but the disparities that you're referencing still exist. In the instance of this particular one, we've been diving in. It's a complex question. I don't think there's a single thing. We've been doing lots of work around implicit bias and training both our staff and providers, making sure that we have ways in which we're doing decision making that include parent advocates to reduce this. One thing that is also interesting here is that we saw in 2024 a pretty significant increase percentage-wise of the young people coming into of the children coming into foster care. It started to increase from about 33% teens to almost 40%. We've brought that back down, and those teens were much more likely to be Black than white, and so we're curious about whether there's things going on with the mental health system. We've been trying to advocate with OMH for parents who are struggling with really meeting their children's behavioral health needs. The children's going to the hospital, and sometimes the parents don't know what to do and don't feel like they're getting the support that they need. Some of those kids have been coming into foster care. Sometimes they stay for a very short time. We built a teen priority initiative to try to use respite instead, to try to use some of the family therapies that we have. But that mental health support is really needed. So we're trying to make sure that our decision making is eliminating bias. We're looking at ways in which we can get the right services upstream. We have a developmental disabilities unit that works with families who may have a developmental challenge, either the young person or the parent. I don't think we have the exact answer because it's a multidimensional, so we need a lot of different initiatives that we're trying to attack this with.
Yeah. Has ACS analyzed whether decision-making practices, risk assessments, or systematic biases are contributed to disproportionate impact on Black families?
Yeah, we look at this. We look at this all the time. Again, it's not an easy sort of evaluation to conclude.
Of course not.
We have our staff are primarily from the communities that we serve. We look constantly every week in ChildStat. We have our family team conferencing with parent advocates, so we have other people and voices in the room. We were asked by the legal advocates a couple years ago to no longer hold a child safety conference after an emergency removal, but go straight to court so that families had their due process more immediately. We adopted that recommendation. Obviously, the court is a major decision maker in this as well. And so we're looking at sort of every aspect of this.
At what point of an emergency removal decision, what oversight mechanisms are in place to ensure decisions are free from bias and based solely on intimate risks?
Yeah. So in addition to the child safety conferences, which include parent advocates, there is a work between our CPS staff and our family court legal services, who very carefully examine the law to make sure that we're following the law in pursuing filings. This is part of how we have reduced filings so dramatically. This past year, in 2025, there were fewer filings than in 2020 during the pandemic and 2021 by a significant measure. And so we're looking at that decision-making process, making sure that we're following the law and looking at all mechanisms that can create and mitigate risk. Our new FPP expansion, as I said earlier, sometimes children were coming into foster care because of home conditions. Can we do things to do heavy duty cleaning, to help with hoarding situations, et cetera? You know, if we look historically, in 1997, 12,538 children came into foster care. This past year, it was just about 3,000. And so the team behind me who's been doing this work for 30 years is the one who has really driven that change. And we are trying to find the least intrusive way to make sure children are safe every single time we do it. We have a responsibility that we think is deeply important to make sure they are indeed safe. But we want to find ways to do that through services and other ways and limit the use of foster care.
Does ACS have data on SCR intakes that are by both race and by borough or neighborhoods? If so, which communities in the city and demographic group experience the highest rates of emergency removals and foster care placements?
We do, and I have the breakdown for you here in a report that we publish on a regular basis on our website. It's Jamaica Queens is actually the highest number of child protective of SCR calls accepted. The Bronx has several communities that are high on that list. And so we see it in pockets where we know poverty exists. We see it in the neighborhoods that we try to reach out to, both for the Family Enrichment Center and child care work. And I have a complete list here for you.
Oh, yes. Sergeant at Arms, excuse me. Can you get the paper? Thank you. In 2025, the MMR states that the decline of kinship placements coincided with rising family poverty and suggests that relatives may be struggling to take in children. What is the current payment structure for kinship and non-kinship foster parents? And does ACS believe that the rates are significant to support caregivers?
Yes, the rates are the same, and they're based on the needs of the child. We've also added a component for the time period when a kinship foster parent is working with an agency to sign up to have direct resources provided to that kinship parent at that time. We've had a steady increase over time around kinship caregiving. Right now, we're about 43% of children in foster care are living with a relative or a close connection that we consider kin. We're looking to continue to increase that. There has been this decline. In Child Stat this morning, we were talking about it in the context of Queens. We have seen some families who are new to New York who have fewer kin resources. We also, on the preliminary kin work, sometimes are working to get children to family members out of state or in different locations. We have a border agreement with New Jersey, but need sometimes families in South Carolina. We're also curious about demographic shifts that have happened in New York. A lot of Black families have moved down south, and so we're doing work to try to reconnect them, but they might not be as local. So every single time a child needs to be removed, there's an extraordinary amount of work to try to identify kin. It's to talk to the young person, to look at the blue book at school, to call teachers, to talk to parents, of course, about where they feel their children will be safe, and to make a decision that night. We do a local clearance. We do not wait for 90 days. The goal is that night. A little over a third of children that night go directly to kin. We've seen, as a result of that effort and many other efforts, a significant decline in the number of children at the Children's Center. Today it's 48. We were averaging close to 100 for a long time. It's about 40% down compared to last January. And we have one child who's 0 to 4 at the Children's Center this morning. And so we're looking to really try to make sure, especially our youngest children, do never have to experience an institutional setting as loving and supportive as our Children's Center staff are.
Well, it's good to hear that the numbers are down in the Children's Center. I actually haven't heard of that. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment. You know,
Thank you.
like you said, I know the staff works hard there, but it's not a place where anyone wants to really be.
We agree.
And
I thank FDC for her leadership. She's both the facility and the staff and the training that's gone into them and the work to support young people. She deserves a lot of credit for.
Absolutely. Thank you, because, that's an accomplishment for you and your team, so appreciate sharing that. Are Black and Latinx children as likely as white children to receive permanency through kinship or adoption? If the disparities exist, what factors are driving them?
Yeah, this is interesting dynamic that we're looking at. It could be related to teens. It could be related to other issues where Black and Hispanic Latinx children are much more likely to go home in the first year. We have seen an increase in reunifications. About 60% of our permanencies last year were reunifications, many of which, the great majority of which work and children are safe. TC Mendez and her team are leading a whole series of efforts. I mentioned the discharge grant in my testimony. I'll give her a moment to talk a little about the permanency efforts they're doing.
Hi, good afternoon.
afternoon.
So with regards to permanency, when children come into care, our goal is to make sure that they achieve safe and timely permanency as soon as possible. So we do a lot of work. I mean, the providers do the brunt of the work because they're doing the case planning, the permanency planning, supporting the parents and the children. But we have put some structures in place to provide technical assistance. So we use data. We have a lot of data. We use data and talk to providers about individual performance, looking at their business process, how their data can inform what they need to do to move cases forward. We give agencies targets so they have a little bit of a goal. They're motivated to work towards reunification or kin gaps or adoptions. And then when agencies are struggling, we bring them together and we try to leverage best practices to see what might be most helpful. And we have a lot of conversations with them about permanency. So that is like extremely important for us as we support agencies to make sure they have their eyes on permanency, which they do. We also give them data that lists everyone that's in their care. It's a permanency list, and they're able to see when children are in that first year that the commissioner mentioned, if they're in the second year of placement or third year of placement, because all of that then guides whether we should be having conversations about changing goals, should we be moving towards kin gap or adoption, because we really don't want children to stay in care longer. So we want to make sure we're looking at how long they've been in care, what are their service needs, and how we can support them and move forward. We also have a good relationship with the Family Court Improvement Project, and they help us work with the court to leverage making sure when adoptions are filed that they get scheduled as soon as possible so that the finalizations can occur.
According to ACS 2023 Racial Equity Assessment, Black children who remain in foster care for 2 years or more are less likely than white children to achieve permanency. What factors do you believe are contributing to this?
So we've been able to make a significant headway on this. We're down from over 6,000 children in foster care 2 or more years to 3,777. I think there's a multitude of things that we need to try to solve here. I also want to note, and I think that this is appropriate, that the court process is quite litigious because here in New York City, because families rightfully have strong counsel, and so if reunification is not happening quickly, it does take some time to achieve other forms of permanency. I think we want to make sure children are stable during that time. We want to make sure that decision making and that children do experience permanency. We are seeing a reduction in the number of children aging out. We're under 400 this year. We obviously built a lot of support for young people to age out with lots of supports, but we never want that to be that is not the goal. The goal is to make sure that every single child is with family.
Thank you. When kidship is not an option, how does ACS consider children's culture, background, religious observations, and gender identity and sexual orientation as an element of their identifying to consider foster care placements?
So when children come into care, there are assessments that are done. We have child and family specialists. Those are licensed social workers that meet with the children, get the history. We work very closely with the Division of Child Protection with the information they gather. Within the Family Permanency Services Division, there's the Office of Placement, and they're able to review those materials. A lot of that goes into what is called the placement module, which is a system that part of the connection system. And then foster care agencies have already proactively entered information on foster parents. So I'm a foster parent, I'm willing to take teens, I can take 3 or 4 teens, how do I identify myself, all of those factors. And the placement model kind of does like a matching process. There are follow-up conversations with the providers, but the providers will get referrals to say, it looks like this child will match with these parents that you have. They'll have discussions. And then we often will facilitate meetings. I'm not really a fan of all of the meet and greets, but we have sometimes there are meetings where foster parents can meet kids to see how that'll go, and vice versa. The kids can meet the foster parents to say, is this the type of placement? Ideally, these things are happening quickly. So, but we do use whatever data we have, conversations, sharing with the agency what we do know about the child to match. And then, of course, when children are older, we will speak to them about their likes, their dislikes, and that will also help with the matching process.
I'd also note we're releasing our LGBTQIA plus policy before I go, which has been updated to, and thanks to many advocates who have informed that policy, including Legal Aid and others.
Yeah, I know we had a hearing on that last year, and I think that it's really important because, those things play a major role in and placement and need to be taken into consideration. And I feel like that question constantly comes up for me, and even making sure in these spaces when we had a shadow day with foster care youth, this was one of the things that they were very adamant about around, like, well, we weren't the same religion, and some folks was like, I identified a certain way and it did not work, and so race is important, but other things need to also be taken into consideration as well. I'm just going to ask a couple more questions and I'll pass it to my colleagues and then I'll come back. ACS reports that it has been collaborating with DOE and HMH and the communities to eliminate biases in reports of child abuse and neglect. The agencies has committed to educating mandated reporters to better understand when a report is required and when it is not. How does ACS measure whether retaining mandated reporters has reduced unnecessary reports to SCR, and have reports from hospital, schools, or significant professional categories declined since the retrainings began?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think this is one of the places where we have taken on a greater responsibility. I think in the past we too often said, we don't really have control over what calls come, we just respond. We have control of how we speak about this work. We have control about how we train folks and talk about it. When we took a look at the trainings that teachers and guidance counselors were getting, they were very fear-based. They included names of children who had died. And you've heard me talk about my perspective on when I was first at ACS, a policy we put in place. I think it's really important that children are in school, but we cannot have a simple measure for when to call the SCR. It has to be a fact-based determination of whether a parent is meeting the minimum degree of care or not. And so without any law changes, we went back to the law and said, there's a lot more discretion and assessment here. And so I just want to give a huge shout out to, among many others, Donna Brailsford at New York City Public Schools, who has really been driving this retraining with us, partnering with us. We've got great partners at health and hospitals and some of the private hospitals. We've reached out to many of the major charter school networks, and we've also been retraining shelter providers as well. As a result, school reports are down between comparing 2023 to 25, down 16%. Social services, including shelters, are down that same amount, 16%. And health and mental health settings are down 7%. Overall, that's led to a decline of about 8% in calls to the SCR.
And I know you specifically mentioned that DOE and H&H, and especially with the new RFP that just came out for DYCD, how are you guys retraining and what does that look like in that process too? Because they play a major role in this, and sometimes I feel like that's kind of like left out. And how have you guys done retraining there? What does that look like? And how are they a part of this conversation?
Yeah, this is something we need to expand, and I appreciate that, Chair Stevens. We didn't start there because they're not the biggest source of calls, but they are, as you point out, an important source of calls. We're also we have a meeting with Kafka later today, where we want to actually tomorrow, where we want to have a conversation in how we train all providers in this, and so. We think we want to go directly to nonprofits for this conversation. We've started with the public systems, but this is an important next step, and we're on it.
Yeah, I would love to make sure that we bridge that gap and however I can help support in that, because I think that it's really important. And sometimes it even looks different. And being on the provider side, a lot of times when the school drops the ball, the nonprofit is the one that's coming in on the back end trying to like scoop it up and like figure it out. And it's it looks a little bit different. So again, we know you're leaving, whatever. But
We have a great team, and they're taking notes.
I love
and we
them
got
too.
this.
They're great too. They better not try to leave me. But just want to make sure that we are thinking about what that looks like, especially with this RFP coming out and this huge expansion. And there's going to be a lot of new people coming in. I want to make sure that they're also being trained in the new way, because like I said, I had to take that training every year for 20 years. So I still consider myself a mandated reporter because I will call. Does ACS have mechanisms to ensure that mandated reporters are adhered to and practices that included as part of such training?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Do you guys have like mechanisms to ensure that mandated reporters are like they're actually doing their job, and practices that include that are included in the training? So in the trainings, do you like have mechanisms for them to know that?
Yeah. So the state is the responsible for the mandated reporter trainings. They've done a few things, including a new decision-making tree that has been helpful. They keep the tracking of making sure that mandated reporters have actually gotten the training. We are exploring whether to become a approved provider. Our trainings have been supplementary, but we think, as I said earlier, that it's really important that our voice be in the room and talking about all the ways folks can get services. We've got a huge increase in the number of families who are coming through our preventive support line, but also an increase in families who are accessing services directly, voluntarily, about 25%, up from 10%. But back to your question, we don't track who has gotten the mandated reporter training sort of generally statewide, but we are tracking with anybody we're engaging with, hospitals, schools, and shelters, and soon DYCD.
I'm gonna hand it over to Councilmember Joseph. I know she has a number of questions.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are going to be along King Gap. How long it took me, and I always talk about this, it took me about 5 years to get my boys. A lot of meetings, a lot of training. It was very traumatic. And I always talk to you about that. So my question around King Gap and how do we make it better, improve the system. I know you redesigned it, but increasing King Gap over congregated residential care. So in 2025, what percentage of children in foster care were placed with kin? Can you share also racial breakdown of youth placed in kinship, including the percentage who are Black, white, Asian, and Latinx?
Yes. First, the number of children who were placed with kin is about 42%, up from 30%. We really would like to get that significantly higher and have a number of initiatives in place to try to drive that. Congregate settings, 9% of children are in congregate settings. There was a slight tick up in that this past year due to the relaunch of our supervised independent living program. These are young people who are living in their own apartments with support. So it's a different kind of residential, one that is not sort of a more traditional congregate setting.
I know earlier you mentioned about sometimes the length of time it takes for agencies to move, and you set goals. How is that working? Because again, I'll mention it. It took me 5 years.
So I want to say one thing before DC Mendez goes, if that's okay. So last year we changed the budgeting process. We've got a different model for, it's not where it was in the day where you get paid per diem, because we don't want there to be incentives to keep kids in care.
Right.
And we are moving resources around based on permanency results by agencies. And so some agencies are doing better as a result of that. Some agencies have to step it up, and we're providing them support in that way. And that is that moment was consistent when we started to see a lot more placements come into care. We've also looked at the agencies rightfully were concerned about whether lawyers would take on the kin gap cases. And so we've looked at a way to increase resources to make sure that there are folks who will take those on. And again, there's been more appeals around kin gap.
Yes.
And we have to honor
Judges
that.
are usually more lenient.
We have to honor that process, right, for important rights for everybody.
So you asked me, the first question was around how is that going in terms of goals. So what we saw in fiscal year 25, we saw more reunifications than in fiscal year 24. I'll give you the numbers when I put my glasses on. Kin gaps also went up. So in fiscal year 25, we had 396 kin gaps compared to 347, but the number of adoptions were less in fiscal year 25. We're at 522 versus 535. I can get you the actual target attainment, so I can let you know, like, of that number, like, were they close to the target or not as a system. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we're constantly focusing on permanency. And when it comes to kin gap and adoption, it's really about the business process, right? Because once the goal is changed to kin gap, there are steps that need to be taken. And what is the agency's business process to get those steps done?
Is there a timeline? Because 5 years is a long time, right?
So I think I would like to actually hear more, if you don't mind, like later, about what that timeline, when that was. I do know, not to be too intrusive, but I think it would be a good lesson learned to understand where the missteps were. ACS now, I don't know when the kin gap for you happened. We actually are able to review the documents and go in the system and approve the kin gap. So that is one thing. We as an organization, FPS, has a business process. So once we get the information from the agencies, we know what we need to do. We try to process those as soon as possible. We give agencies training on the various documents that need to be submitted with the packet. We really are trying to refine the process.
And
I can ask Associate Commissioner Soto Ponte what the normal timeline should be. I
Right.
don't have that information. The other thing I will say around kin gap, because the commissioner mentioned sometimes they are contested. The agencies brought that to us, and we talked about how can we try to make sure we're supporting families, because if we see kin gap is coming and we know, for example, two sisters don't get along, how are we working that, like, from a case practice process to support them? But we also talked to the Court Improvement Project. They did a training on mediation, and we're asking FCLS to say, let's go to mediation to help, mitigate some of those issues as well.
And Chair, I didn't answer your question about the breakdown in kin. So it's pretty consistent. Black children, Hispanic children, and white children, all about 42, 43% in kin. The one outlier is that Asian Pacific Island families, children is 21.6%. It's a much smaller number, but we're looking at that and what we can do to increase that.
Thank you. In your 2025 MMR states that decline in kingship placement coincide with rising family poverty, and suggests that relatives may be struggling to take in children. What is the current payment structure for kingship and non-king foster parent, and what does ACS believe those rates are sufficient to support caregivers? I know folks who mean well, right, but I can't afford to take an extra child in.
So
what does that look like?
So absolutely. So if kin is identified, let's say during the investigation process, we now have a mechanism. We've increased the funding, so we're able to give those kin parents cash on a weekly basis. Then when they're assigned to the agencies, they will receive the full foster parent stipend. So whether I'm a kin or a non-kin, the amount is the same depending on the needs of the child. We ask kin parents to become certified, and they go through that process. So once they become a kin parent, they will receive the same resources. In addition to the finances, they get the same amount of case planning. The children receive the same types of services, and all of those wraparound supports. And I think what we're hearing or learning is that kin parents need to come together so they can talk to other kin. So we're encouraging agencies to create support groups, have like mentoring programs, and really do a lot, not only to identify the children, but to support them and retain them. And there are instances when kin actually become non-kin foster parents. When their kin are reunified, they want to stay as a foster parent.
And I do want to note on the front end, we believe all families need support, and so we reinvested about $8 million to help nonprofits meet concrete needs for families to keep children out of foster care. We've also are launching with DSS an economic and concrete services that doesn't have to come through ACS, but we want to make sure that when families are in contact with us, they have all of their benefits, someone to navigate them to that, so that they can have that stability.
Just to piggyback on your question around the timeline, if things go as planned, it should take 10 to 12 months for a kin gap to be completed. From the
So we
goal
gotta
change.
talk as to why it took
Yes,
5 years
from the goal
for me to
change to the
from
completion.
beginning to
Absolutely.
adoption. For me, it took 5 years.
Okay.
And in and out of court. So I don't ever want that to happen to another parent who mean well, right? Who wants to foster and then adopt the boys. But it took 5 years in my case, from beginning to end, or until I got the boys. So we don't want to see that. And so that's why I'm asking what kind of reforms you're doing around that. The length, because I know after 18 months, the state is supposed to come in and start looking for permanency and all of that. I did all of that twice. I did two sets of 18 months before I finally got the boys. So I want to prevent that from the beginning for any parent who means well, who wants to take in children, but 5 years is a long time. I ran out of days as a teacher because I went back and forth to court so many times.
Definitely, we can make time to talk and hear more and figure out the missteps and make sure that they're not repeated.
And when you do reunification with parents, what kind of support do you provide when that child go back into the house? Is there mental health support for everyone when that child re-enters that family?
So with reunification, it's almost like a two-step process. So agencies are preparing families for reunification. So that's where they're assessing. Maybe that's when we're moving to overnight visits and they're doing that kind of work ahead of time. The commissioner discussed the discharge grant because while reunification is a time where the child and their parents are coming back together, there's financial needs, right? And so the discharge grant was recently increased to $2,000 per child, and that will help the parents plan for the children. The child may have left, they were 2, they had one size bed, now maybe they're 3, they need a bigger bed, they need more furniture, they need additional clothes, and that, to me, releases the stress. They don't have to worry about the finances. So that's one aspect. Then when they are reunified, we have trial discharge. So agencies are still expected to provide service planning, case planning, make casework contacts, assess how that trial period is going. They report back to the court. We have family team conferences that ACS facilitates prior to trial discharge and prior to final discharge to make sure the family is in a good place to close out the case. And to answer your question, yes, the service plan will remain the same. So if it's counseling, if the child needs counseling, maybe this is the time where family counseling is introduced. There's information that they're gathering just to make sure everything is steady, things are going well. And the goal of trial discharge is to help continue to provide as many services the family needs. We often may make referrals to prevention at that time to continue to support the family.
And I know at one point, I know you are now currently in public schools with a preventive. Is that plan, do you plan to expand? Because I know that's one of the things Councilmember Stevens and I talk about. We want prevention before a case happens. We want to make sure the supports are in place for parents and families. Do you plan to expand, and how is that going? And how many schools, just off the top of my head, I can't remember, how many schools are you in? And do you plan to expand the program till more families are aware of this?
So a couple of things. One is there's 16 contracts. They serve about 3 schools each. So it's just under 50 schools. We've created, it's going well. They're just launched. There's no expansion plan yet, but we've seen a lot more families access services. And as I mentioned in my testimony, we created this kind of pilot to test a capacity to give providers resources to be able to serve families with concrete needs and other supports without opening a prevention case, because obviously we've heard very often that folks don't want to be a case. And so we're looking at all ways we can do that. We've expanded the Family Enrichment Center. There's also, I think both in the mental health space and generally in family support, we want to be supportive of initiatives outside of the ACS the continuum. And so this work that we're doing with the health department to help them expand NFPX, the work that many advocates are doing to re-envision some family well-being work, that's all conversation we think is really important in this domain, whether it's within the ACS continuum or outside of it.
I know we're talking about the harm caused by ACS. How do we look back for the families that were harmed 50 years ago? How do we go back and fix a lot of that harm that was done to communities of color?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we had there's about 50,000 children in foster care in 1996. There's been a lot of work to change that, related to harm that has been committed, harm that is continuing to happen. I think I really appreciate Commissioner Tajani's testimony. I think we have to have ways to come together to have different structures, whether that's the Accountability Council or some other way. My hope is that it's very diverse experiences with ACS are represented. Absolutely young people, absolutely families, parents. About 7% of families experience of investigations, about 7% go to family court. And so we know there's lots of different experiences. We also know that intrusion unnecessarily is a very harmful thing. And I think something that I've tried to bring to this work, in all my conversations with the team and all of the ways in which we're leading, is you can do great, you can make absolute strides and change people's lives for the positive, or you can do harm in this work, whether that's a young person who's unsafe, whether that's a family that's disrespected. I really appreciate my staff who put themselves at that nexus and try to get it right. We have a huge responsibility, and whenever we do harm, it has to be acknowledged, whether it's historical or current.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Joseph. My next question is, neglect reported by schools called by educator reporters are far less likely to be substantiated than calls by other mandated reporters in New York City, and calls by education reported that alleged neglect only were substantiated 89% of the time in 2023. More than 82% of the children in those reports are Black and Latino. ACS has trained 1,300 educators that can directly support families instead of making a report, and education reporters' calls have come down 19% since 2023. However, educators still call the hotline 10,000 times in 2025. What is ACS learning about education report calls, particularly related to neglect, and how schools can more often directly link families to resources?
I think there's two important things here. One is that we've learned. One is that the fear associated with not calling is real. That is, whether that's concern about criminal liability, whether that's concern about liability related to licensure, or even just sort of in community. The other piece is that folks didn't know enough about where to get help other than, so it was, we have this situation, let's call the SCR. And I think our message used to be, when in doubt, let us figure it out. And so at the same time, more than half of the calls from schools are not educational neglect only. And so they involve concerns about potential abuse. They concern a number of different other factors. So we want schools to call when they feel a child is in danger, and we want them to get help when they think a family needs support, and they are well positioned. And I really, really appreciate our colleagues at New York City Public Schools, because they've taken this on as their mandate. They're really well positioned to help. The state has made a couple changes, which is that when they call for educational neglect only, they ask the school, what have you done? And so, have you sent anybody out? Have you tried to solve this problem? Have you provided resources? And I think that's been an important part in reducing the calls as well.
Yeah, I think that piece is so important, because so often it's like, how did you contribute to this, or did you find out any more information? So I think that is important. The next question I have is also, and Councilmember Joseph kind of hit on this as well, is the school-based early support program. And I know this is something you've been championing and I'm really excited about having. Have you seen schools making use of this program, and could you talk a little bit about what this has been like from this launch? What are some of the things that you've seen to help support this and the vision behind it?
Yeah, it's been really encouraging, and thank you to Deputy Commissioner Linares for her leadership around this. We have seen about a 20% increase in families accessing services if you look at the last 6 months compared to 6 months previously. And over the last few years, we've seen from about 10% to 25% of families accessing preventive services voluntarily, not through a child protective route. And when they do, their records are protected. They sit at the nonprofits. They're not in the ACS system of record, so it doesn't become part of a potential subsequent child protective investigation. And it's important families see that protection. They're called advocates cases because the advocates sued a quarter century ago to protect that from being within the child protective system, and it's something that New York City should be really proud of. Each nonprofit has been engaging schools. We've had lots of success trying to really make sure that they know how to access the support through early school-based early support. I would also say, where there were challenges in the beginning and sort of understanding that our New York City Public Schools partners were really great to try to help us work with the principals, work with the superintendents. Each of the superintendents had to sign off on the contract being submitted, and then we had to really drill that down with the principals. There's very regular convenings that we have with the schools and with the providers together to make sure that we're solving all those issues.
And with the 50 schools that this program is in, were you guys looking at areas where there were like high numbers of reports, or like how was the demographics like broken up? Like, were there a lot of calls in that school?
Yeah.
Were you just looking at poverty rates? How was that determined?
It was rates of poverty. It was rates of calls to ACS. It was rates of unemployment, a whole host of things. And Winnette is telling me that we've had 1,077 families who are served through that model so far.
And have you seen like a decrease in those areas because that the schools are in now because they have this new service?
I think it's too early to say. To see, we can take a look. I don't think an evaluation would be primed yet. We're still in the first year of it, but that's the goal.
And so even with thinking about even the enrichment centers and thinking about, because I know the expansion happened, it's been like a year or so. Have we seen a decline in those communities as well, with the presence of enrichment centers in those communities?
We've been doing,
and I know
so
all of
many
them haven't opened, so I know.
Yeah, but we've been taking down lots of, obviously we've seen this decrease in the scope of the child protective system. And it's across the city. I think we've been doing a lot of different things at once, and so I don't think we're yet positioned to attribute it to one initiative or another, because we have about a dozen things that we've talked about going on at the same time, but it's something we're really curious about figuring out.
Yeah, you came in with a lot of ideas, so.
So I had a lot of people in my ear, some behind me.
Listen, we appreciate it. Truancy and other attendance issues reported as educational neglect in New York Times reported in two pieces last week. Half of the state did not have educational neglect in their stature, meaning that child protection is not called when children are absent from school. What is ACS learning from the nature of educational neglect reports, specifically through CARES cases, and what might ACS see in the next steps in city efforts to address attendance issues without a child protective response?
Yeah, I think a few things. One is we, in educational neglect cases only, whether it's CARES or a child protective investigation, we really try to understand what the root cause is. Sometimes there are challenges with young people's behavior, lack of access to services. Sometimes there is mental health challenges for the parents. Sometimes there's a combination. And so we really try to understand what services can help. We try to do meetings with the school to see if we can work something out. Sometimes it's an inappropriate school placement, or an IEP hasn't been done, or there's school phobia. There really is not a single one, which is why we have to make sure we understand and do a careful assessment.
CARES is an alternative response to child welfare investigation for low and moderate risk reported concerns of child abuse and maltreatment. Can you explain why CARES is a core strategy for combating racial disparities?
Yeah, I think it's key, because if we can solve a problem without having a family have an indication of maltreatment, even if there has been some concern, that is not going to saddle them with an economic hardship where they can't get certain jobs. when a young person is not going to school, and the parent has not been able to express a minimum degree of care in that moment, if we can help them get, in some cases, we see parents who are experiencing depression or going through some trauma themselves. And so we want to make sure we can help families without then making it harder for them to do well. The indication or unsubstantiation is an administrative decision. It doesn't really drive the next steps. I think it's a tool that I think we should really be examining, because it doesn't indicate just because there's an indication you have to go to court. The real question is, what's the risk and how do you mitigate it in the least intrusive way? And so that's the goal that we are trying to rally around. It's one of the reasons I think CARES kind of eliminates that indication or not conversation and allows for more trust and more conversation to be had, because families don't have to have fear that they're going to get that indication if they tell a story that might include some mistakes.
According to ACS data in FY 2025, white and Asian families were referred to CARES at higher rates than Black and Latinx children. What strategy or mechanisms is ACS considering to address this disparity?
Yeah. It's pretty close, but we gotta narrow it even further. We look at this in child stat constantly. We look by allegation, by race. We think there's some difference in allegation by race, and CARES is driven by allegation. So there are certain certain things you cannot go down the CARES track with if they're alleged. And so we're trying to narrow that gap to make sure we're looking geographically. It's one of the key indicators in our CARES child stat work. And we're always trying to examine with each borough, each neighborhood, each zone to make sure we understand the distribution. A lot of this, the determination for CARES, it is a few steps. The state labels it FAR eligible, family assessment response, sort of, we call it CARES here in New York City. It's then looked at by our applications team, which does a quick look at the allegation and the history, and then it is initially tracked down one way or the other. You can go back from an investigation to CARES within the first 7 days. And so we're also working with staff to identify places where that initial track towards an investigation could be reevaluated.
In New York State's hotline screens for far fewer calls than most states, which contribute to high investigation rates of New York City's for Black and Latino families. This suggests that many CARES cases would not be referred if children protective responses in other states. What types of cases does the agency believe could be handled in other ways? For instance, materials needed in hardships. ACS investigators frequently find food assistance, baby supplies, including cribs, strollers, diapers, clothes, childcare vouchers, and connected to benefits and screening for parents. How might stronger community pathways to family supports prevent ACS involvement? Because I know, like, a lot, even with the enrichment centers, that is something that you guys have really been using to create community solutions. But are there other things that we should be looking to do to try to just like kind of help? I know Core mentioned like a universal basic income, or are there other things that you think should be implemented?
Yeah, I think every way we can help families have the security that they need, we should be pursuing. At the state level, I know there's a lot of conversation about reforming the SCR, and OCFS is very engaged in that. I think one thing that we could do is create a state law that allows for local discretion around having cases be closed before the 7-day period. And so often, someone, especially around malicious reports, someone can call, make an allegation. We might have been in the home 2 days before. There might be a series of malicious allegations. The work that we have to do, sometimes we call the state and say, can you take this back? But they have to make the decision by current law, sort of based on the allegation. If it was true, if it was credible, it would constitute maltreatment. We sometimes know a lot more than they do. And so if we had that discretion at a local level, our idea, and we've been talking to various folks around that, would be to create in state law the capacity for localities to have that discretion, and then maybe have localities submit a plan to the state like we do for CARES. So they created discretion around different tracks. This could be almost a third track. And so if we got a very similar call to something we've just investigated, we don't believe the credibility of the caller, maybe we do a virtual visit and then we close it out, or maybe we pursue support in a different way. I think New York City needs more discretion in that regard.
That's a good recommendation. We'll definitely note that. What is the current budget for preventative services, and how has it changed since 2021's foster care redesign? Could you provide context on any shifts in funding priorities or allocation over this period, and what aspects of preventive services are the most costly?
So it is. I get the exact number. I forgot it was in a budget hearing that it was.
Sorry, Stephanie.
Yeah. So it's $300 million plus. But we have been doing a lot of work in preventive services, actually, to examine the whole system. Last year we took a look at chronic underutilization, where families really were not voting with their feet to access those family support services. We took that down, but we reinvested that money into helping nonprofits on workforce and helping nonprofits meet concrete needs. The most expensive of the preventive services are the treatment modalities that are evidence-based. But we've been putting more and more money in services that are most accessible.
According to 2025 data, despite representing a significant share of SCR intakes, Black children account for a smaller share of preventive services cases opening. What criteria guides referrals to preventive services, and how does ACS ensure the criteria are applied equitable?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that is less about the referral differences and more about families where they want to get services. And so we more often see Black families wanting to get services from community-based organizations, from where they trust in the community and not have an ongoing preventive services case. This is something we're trying. It's one of the reasons we are extending this different type of preventive service, where you do not have to open a case through the school-based early support process. But we really do want to respect family voice and agency. We got to make sure our services are ones that folks trust and are strong. And so we're seeing this new wave around more and more voluntary families coming to preventive services, which we're encouraged by. But we do want to make sure if a family has a community that can support them, we shouldn't override that.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely we shouldn't, but, we want to make sure that it's not a repeat thing. And so how do we keep track of that? So I would love for us to think about, well, not you, but us, the rest of us, figure out how to keep track of that. Because I think it is important for us to make sure that, yes, they can say they're going to get the services, but what does the follow-up look like?
And Chair, if I may, this year, $372.4 million is in prevention services.
When a parent proactively seeks preventative services because they're struggling with child behavior challenges, including violence or high-risk behavior, what is the average time between referral and the start of services? And are there differences in wait times based on borough, provider, or level of need?
Yeah. There's no wait lists. We're able to provide services right away. Sometimes it does take a few conversations and visits to begin engage that work. And so it can take up to a couple weeks, but that's really based on a family reaching out voluntarily. We don't have any wait lists in any part of the city. We've also created this, as I was referencing earlier, this teen priority initiative. When a hospital calls us, sometimes on the weekends we get calls from the court after a young person's been arrested and the parent can't pick them up. That should not be a foster care entry. And too often it has been. And so we're creating this process where immediately we can get the family services, work with those systems, not have that child enter foster care, use respite more often, which we're building out. But I really want to emphasize that we need the help of the mental health system. And this should not be the child welfare system's responsibility. A family should not have to have a an intrusive model like that. So we're working with the Office of Mental Health at the state level, asking them if, they're building a number of services coming out of this consent decree. But families should be able to walk in and get the help that they need. And the system is not designed for young people who are struggling the most.
Yeah.
Part of the reason we're seeing too many young people in detention, it's part of the reason we saw an increase in teens. We're going to do everything we can to serve those families when they come to our attention. But I think it'd be great to pay as much attention to figuring out ways in which those services are actually accessible, not just through an emergency room, but if you have an ACT team responding to a crisis of a teen, that teen should be eligible for all the services that they need, intensive outpatient, day treatment, whatever it is that they need in a culturally competent way. And we have a long way to go to do that.
No, I mean, I 100% agree. I think that is probably one of the biggest issues where it's like, it's nowhere else to put it. So let's just put it with ACS. And we haven't been doing real comprehensive work around the mental health services. And I will say this, young people have been advocating since literally for the last 4 years. That has been one of the number one things they've been asking me for is jobs and mental health services.
Amen.
And young people have been very clear about this, but for some reason the adults have not been listening. And so I agree and want to keep making sure that I'm fighting and pushing that and uplifting that young people say they want more services, mental health services, and they want jobs, but we're not listening. I actually have a lot more
Career
questions.
choice is coming.
You said career choice is coming?
It's
Wow.
here. Sorry.
As we discussed at a previous hearing, advocates have worked with the Mayor's Office of Policy and Planning on the concept of the Office of Family Wellbeing that would strengthen community planning for families' life and invest in grassroots organizations to support families. How could it help reduce racial disparities in ACS involvement to build up the family support capacity of grassroots groups?
I think it's a wonderful idea to have a city entity that's focused solely on family wellness. I think it's important that our child protective specialists have at their fingertips supportive services, talked about FPP, talked about preventive services, lots of other things, that there's not just sort of a binary choice for them about sort of removal or not. And so I do think some things should be connected to the child protective system, or at least very easily accessible. But the more that we can put in a place where families feel less stigma, I absolutely support that. It is complicated, all the procurement stuff, all the contracting. There's you have to be a local district of social services, but I see no reason we shouldn't urgently kick off a planning process to look at what an Office of Family Wellbeing would look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely need to get to a place of like, what does it look like to support families in a real way, and not always as punitive. I think that, again, under your leadership, there has been a real push around trying to have other mechanisms so it's not always punitive, but I want to be clear, because of a lot of the harm and what has been done in the past, why would now these same families want to trust and say, okay, I want to have a case? And it's still a lot of work that needs to be done there. And
Chair, even if we have a perfect system,
yeah,
if you walk with the power to remove a child, that is fear-inducing, period, right? And so we have to walk with it with integrity and follow the law and make sure we're doing a job to protect those children. But we also have to acknowledge that is something that families are not going to want to walk towards.
no, absolutely not. Like, it's why would someone sign up for it? And again, I think also too, again, I know that it's been this big push to say we want other avenues to get into ACS without having to be punitive. But how are you even doing that rebranding? How do families supposed to know? I know we've talked about this a number of times, but could you talk about some of the work that you guys have done to try to let families know that there has been somewhat of a shift, but still with the understanding of why families would still stay away?
Yeah, I think there's a few things happening here. One is, we've really tried to allow, whether it's the family enrichment centers, the family enrichment centers, or the community partnerships, to develop them outside of ACS branding or even the nonprofits branding, so that they are driving sort of a community visioning process. The preventive support line has proved very successful as well in this regard. We're working to try to get out more messaging. We worked very hard when we were expanding childcare to get out messaging around that in local communities. We went through both for Promise and other services, went through community-based organizations that families trust. There's also the culture shift at ACS, and if I could give a minute or two to Elvita Dominique, our Director of Equity Strategies, and FTC Saunders, just to talk about some of the ways in which we're creating a culture of anti-racism within ACS as well.
So good afternoon, Honorable Chair and honorable members of the Youth and Family Committee. It is my pleasure today to talk to you about the Office of Equity Strategies. It was established in 2018 and it was moved under my purview, the Office of the First Deputy Commissioner, in 2021 to ensure and broaden agency-wide reach. With that being said, there are 3 units that comprise our office. One is LGBTQIA plus equity strategies. 2 is race equity strategies. And 3 is our new office of fatherhood engagement. We work really hard to support all branches of our agency in their efforts to eliminate disparities and address disparities and disproportionality that impact the families and children and staff that we serve and work with. Some of the things that we've been really focused on, well, let me say in 4 different ways we really these are the primary ways we engage. So 1 is improving policy and practice and advancing equity. 2 is developing initiatives and strategies that eliminate and address these inequities. 3 is developing a culture and shifting the culture where family voice and youth and parent voice are elevated and respected. And the 4th one is really creating an inclusive environment for our workforce. With that being said, many of the things that our commissioner mentioned with regard to the expansion of CARES, the launch of early school supports have been mentioned, but there are other things such as training, and we talked about it a little bit through some of the discussions that was had earlier this morning, but our policy refresh, as you know, we've had a policy on LGBTQIA and the promotion of a safe environment, but it was done in 2012. We know that there is a need for a modernization of those policies and making sure that we include the voice of young people and parents and families. So we are very much in tune with making sure that we're elevating parent and youth voice. You might know that we actually created couple of years ago, a family engagement specialist that works with the entire agency. Just recently, we've embedded a parent advisor in the family support division, family services division. In addition to that, we have a parent advocacy council that weighs in on policies and different protocols that are currently in place or things that they bring to our attention that they want to discuss and they want to elevate. We also have a youth leadership council that also has a voice in the practice and protocols that are happening at ACS. With that being said, there are so many things that I can talk about, but I really want to give an opportunity to our executive director, Elvita Dominique, to really discuss some of the work that she leads.
Thank you so much, FDC. You've been so thorough actually already. I just want to add just a few things. So, with regard to the race equity work, I think today we spent a lot of time talking about our services and the ways in which we're really trying to embed race equity into those services. And, so some of that work has already been highlighted. FDC mentioned it. The commissioner mentioned it. We're talking about like expansion of cares, expansion of the family enrichment centers, expansion of child care assistance, all of that we consider a part of our race equity strategy work within ACS. So I'll focus a little bit more on what we're doing internally in terms of the culture shift. So there's a lot of investment going on in terms of staff training. So we have actual trainings developed by ACS, such as understanding and undoing implicit bias, that's mandated for ACS staff. And this training helps staff identify and mitigate bias. But then we also supplement that with additional trainings that we make available to staff as well, such as undoing racism, which we partner with the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond to help staff address how racism operates in large systems. And then to really further allow them to develop that equity lens, we also provide reflective practice and we also provide healing circles. The reflective practice allows for facilitated spaces so staff can kind of take what they've learned in these trainings and really think about how they can incorporate it into their work. And the healing circles really allow folks to kind of manage the stress that is really involved in doing this work really well. Further to that, in terms of our internal work, ACS has rolled out a scoring tool for interviews agency-wide, and all interviews are required to follow a structured interview process to allow for more fairness in our hiring processes. We also have developed internally, again, an equity checklist that's a tool for staff that they can use to self-reflect and achieve an equity lens before any interactions or meetings. ACS also has an ACS Racial Equity and Cultural Competence Committee, which was founded in 2006 and is actually very influential in the promotion of race equity at ACS and the development of our office, the Office of Race Equity Strategies. The general committee of the REC is open to all staff from every level and every division, as well as representatives from provider agencies and the child welfare advocate community. We also have a robust group of employee resource groups that are open to all staff that include the African American Heritage Committee, the Latino Heritage Committee, the Pride Alliance, and many others. We've developed also an agency framework which really identifies what our overall focus is as an agency. And within that framework really has advancing equity is one of the main purposes, so staff can kind of understand how all of our work really is leading towards this greater goal of success for children, youth, and families. So we're really looking at how all of these tools can really promote the culture shift that we're looking for as an agency.
Thank you. That was a lot. ACE, and I know in the conversation we did talk about the parent advocates, and so I know there's about 150 parent advocates with the lived experience to help provide mentorship and advocacy for parents with children currently in the foster care system. Are those paid parent advocates, are they compensated for that work? And what are the rates for families who receive PPE support compared to what are the unification rates of families who receive PEP supports compared to those who do not? And does ACS determine which families receive a parent advocate, and how do you ensure that they deploy equitable?
So regarding the Parents Empowering Parents program, that's through that's within the foster care agency, the foster care continuum. I lost my voice, sorry. But so they are staff. They are hired by the foster care agency. So yes, they are absolutely compensated. They are full-time staff. They are trained by RISE, but they have other onboarding training. So they're a bona fide employee of the foster care agencies that they work for. They're embedded in the case planning teams or the units. So each unit is a unit of 4 case planners and a supervisor. So that's about 40 cases. And ideally they are assigned new cases that have a goal of reunification. So that's how they're kind of assigned. I think you asked a question
about timing. We don't.
I got that right. Would you ask something else about the parents that get the parent?
How are you determine the parent advocates? How do you ensure that they are deployed equitably?
So they're embedded in their unit, and we usually based on new cases, those cases or cases that are in need, or if a parent has asked for a parent advocate, they are given. So each unit, the goal is for each unit to have their own parent advocate so that one advocate isn't spread too thin. In terms of being able to track like the permanency rates, we're not able to do that at this time. We have been in conversations with OCFS to create a field and connections, for example, so that we could pull that data to see like with the time it took that particular case to achieve permanency and if there was a parent advocate. But we don't have a way to track that in connections yet. But we'll continue those conversations, and we're hoping that's definitely data we want to look at.
Yeah. And also, how can we use that in other spaces, right? I think it's important to people who have those experiences to be there to support. Beyond the work that you've talked about, ACS will continue to reduce racial disparities with child welfare. Are there external factors that other state agencies or other agencies should address to support these efforts?
Yeah, I think we've talked about a few of them. I think one of the things is that the child welfare system, by law and by responsibility, has been imbued with this urgency. That's not necessarily the case in other systems that are helping systems, and so we want to make sure there's as much urgency to get families help, to mitigate risk, to provide that kind of help. I think we talked about that, whether that's the mental health system. We're really grateful for the colleagues who have engaged with us around this, both in the mental health system, in the hospital system, shelters, schools, et cetera.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the legislation. I know you already said that you love the legislation that I'm putting forward. That's what I heard.
Sort of.
In Intro 449 and Intro 446 would require ACS representatives to inform parents or guardians that they are not required to consent to a home visit, search, or speak to ACS staff. Does ACS anticipate that providing this advancement could affect the levels of voluntary cooperation for families?
It could, but let me back up if I may. A couple years ago, we began providing families with information at the front door about key rights. We share with them that we're there as a result of a call alleging maltreatment. We share with them that we are seeking permission to come in, that they can deny that permission, that if they deny that permission, we have to find the best way to assess the safety of their children, which may include seeking permission from a family court. We also let them know they can call an attorney at any time during the investigation, and we have a packet for them with attorney information in it. That has not changed the rate of which we've been able to carry out assessments and work with families within their home. The legislation, so I think that's really important. You know, we're the only place in the state that is doing this, one of the few places in the country. Some of the additional expectations in the legislation we're interested about. I am concerned that given that about 7% of families go to court, and that moment of starting the investigation is not consistent with custodial interrogation or arrest, which is when Miranda is read in law enforcement, that we could, in using that language, actually strike more fear that we are further along. We don't know what would happen to family court. Family court is accessible 24/7. I have a hypothesis that it would increase the number of times we have to seek for an order to produce or an entry order. The current state law and regulation requires that we make an attempt before we seek court intervention, and so that could create challenges in assessing child safety. You know, my view, again, is that we sort of have to narrow the ubiquity of our system, but be able to assess child safety when children truly may be in danger and to make sure we're protecting. So we really hope to continue this conversation about exactly what to say at that front door.
No, I mean, I agree. Listen, my guiding star is always to keep young people safe and children safe, and so that's always my guiding star. But we want to make sure that parents know their rights and understand their rights, right? And I also believe if you're already doing it, I'm all about codifying, because as we can see, there can be someone at the head that's really good, but they don't stay. So we have to codify the things that we believe are necessary so that when the next person come in, that policy can't change. And so I'm very open to amending this and hearing feedback, but I do think that it is important for us to figure out what makes the most sense, especially because you're already testifying that this is something that's already being done to families. My next question is, if a parent refuses to entry to ACS, and how would Intro 4449 change ACS process for assessing immediate intimate danger during the initial contract?
We're not sure. The current practice that we are pursuing has not changed that. We have staff on all through the night. The court is available, so if we do need to get an entry order, we work to pursue that. Sometimes that escalates things further than might be necessary. So I do worry about unnecessary court involvement. But I don't want to suggest that we have experience with what that would do.
My next question is, does ACS anticipate? Does ACS have data on the number of families where the parents or legal guardians of children who are subject to investigation have limited English proficiency?
We do. 12,383 parents in investigations had a primary language other than English. Okay. And we fulfilled 146,441 requests for interpretation. This includes for child protective, families in prevention, and foster care, as well as the Children's Center.
And what does those interpretation services typically consist of?
They consist of language line, where there's
I heard language line is terrible.
And we've had
that's what folks have complained to me about.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Folks have complained about language line in a number of ways, and so
we have new contracts going into place. This is something that it'll be the first time ACS has our own contracts. I think we've seen a lot of success with them, but I'd love to hear any of the concerns. Yeah, they have in person, which we typically use for conferences and other kinds of.
An Intro 424 would require DOH to HM to establish operate a pilot program to provide mental health services at no cost to children who have been returned to their families following removal by ACS. Approximately how many children are returned home following an Article 10 removal each year, and what percentages receive mental health services? My question is, it was my understanding that when young people are transitioning out, there's typically a transition plan, and there's usually services that's already provided. So is this something I'm trying to figure out what gap we're trying to fill here?
There's two things going on here. One is families who are unifying. Many of those children are much younger. And we have the capacity to continue to serve them for up to a year. Some families want that, some families don't. We do not have the capacity to track what services that they access for some good reasons, HIPAA laws and otherwise. But it would be helpful if we could get more data from OCFS, maybe de-identified from OCFS about children in foster care and children and the Office of Mental Health as well, just to be able to see how much treatment is being provided. Agencies have all built Article 29Is where they can provide that treatment, both medical and mental health. For young people who are aging out of care, which is a little less than 400 each year, there is, as you know, the coach, there's mental health services that they can attach to. They've also, DC Mendez can talk for a second about, because I know she would love to, about soul care. This is something the young people created.
Oh, yes, I remember this. You told me about this in the hearing before.
Yes, so Soul Care is a public-private partnership we have with Public Policy Lab and a wellness collective. Melody Santano is part of that. And we're really looking at how to provide alternate supports, therapeutic supports, but not your traditional therapy. Because many of our young people have done the CBT, they've done the didactic
They said
training.
they don't want it. Listen, I hear the kids. That's why I keep saying young people need to
So-
be in these spaces, because we keep coming up with things. They're like, nah, that's not what we asked for.
So Soul Care is a small pilot, but we are going to continue moving forward. And so we're able to offer boxing. There's hip hop therapy. There's other things. We're working with an organization called Art Pharmacy. So we really are trying to support young people to, reach their best potential, but also support them, in ways that they want to be supported. And so we have some funding. We're in the process of trying to expand the pilot, and then we'll probably try to look at how we can make sure this is baselined
Is that one of your new needs this year? Because it is budget season.
It will be. We're
just
not
making
there
sure.
yet, but it will be. Yes, I think we're going to
Excellent.
probably do that. We need to get the evaluation as well, like just to make sure it's effective and continue.
Listen, it's music to my ears when you say you're doing a pilot and an evaluation, because government doesn't do that apparently. So I appreciate that.
So we're going to try to see, but we really are hearing good things from the pilot.
I just have one more question before I wrap up. ACS testified that children can continue Medicare services up to 1 year after discharge from foster care agencies notifying the management care company. Even with the Medicare eligibility, are there provider shortages or long wait lists that prevents timely access to care? Because that was something that we heard from young people from some of the roundtables we've done.
For this particular population, they are able to access it ongoing through the same care that they've been receiving while they're in care. But yes, there are absolute needs for greater mental health access in the community.
Yeah, that was one of the things that we were hearing, that even when they do have a plan and have Medicare, there's still long wait lists or limited options. And so that is definitely something we'll be working with Chair Caban on to figure out how do we continue to do the expand services.
There's also there is a pilot that we're doing with Northwell where for young people who are interested in being part of their health home continuum and accessing services. We gave them stipends to sort of learn more about it and just to see if there's a way to create a sort of health community for them. So something else that we might be learning from in the future.
Well, with that, I don't have any more questions. And so this is our last hearing together. We so appreciate your services and really look forward to working with you again in the future, because that's what we do in this work.
Thank
so
you,
thank
Chastity.
you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
for
your
your
support.
team. Thank you guys for the work that you do. And from this, it seems like we still have a lot of work to do around addressing these racial disparities, and this will be something that's at the top of my priorities, to continue to get these numbers down and work with you guys to see how this works, because it seems like there's a lot of things in play, but sometimes this moves a little short. But I only got 4 years, so we're gonna have to move a little bit faster. So thank you guys for the work that you do.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair
you.
Stevens.
Thank you. That concludes. Oh wait, where am I always start reading through. They actually do stay, because you'll see them. They'll be in the front, so they typically stay in the front. I know, but I'm telling you, well, you're not supposed to make noise in the room, but ACS actually do stay in the room, and they actually stay at all of the hearings. They'll be right here in the front listening. Stephanie, who is actually going to be staying here and moving forward, is here to listen, who has been at all of my hearings to the end, and typically the lone survivor with me at the end. So I just want to make sure that it is known they're not leaving. She's sitting here right in the room, and she does a lot of good work. So I now open the hearing for public testimony. I remind publics that this is a formal government proceeding and that decorum shall be and always observed. As such, a member of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recordings or photographs allowed at the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings at testimony, but you should submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant of Arms at the conclusion of your of the hearing. If you wish to speak today, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant of Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you have 2 minutes to speak today on today's hearing topic, examining racial disparities in the child welfare system. If you have a written statement or additional testimony you want to submit for the record, please provide a copy to the Sergeant of Arms. I will now call the first panel. You can call them. You can call them.
Nora McCarthy, Joyce McMillan, and Shalonda Curtis Hackett.
Did she have testimony you wanted to read for her, or you?
We'll send it in.
Okay,
after.
okay, no
Thanks,
problem. Thank you.
Okay. You want to go? No, go ahead. No, you go.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify about the steps that New York City and ACS can take to address racial disparities in how Black and Latinx families are treated by the child welfare system. First, I want to speak about Miranda. ACS is investigating and separating thousands of families every year, but keeping them in the dark about their rights. Families are facing the high risk of permanent separation and need Miranda protections. When the government exercises its power to investigate families, parents must be clearly advised orally and in writing in their primary language of their right to remain silent and their right to have an attorney. Second, I want to talk about the Office of Family Wellbeing. CAPTA, the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, is a federal law that established the core functions of the Child Protection Agency. These are clear and limited: to investigate allegations and to take legal action when children are in danger. Let's be clear, those are policing functions. We must be honest about what ACS is and what it is not, and what it is actually responsible to be. ACS is not a social services agency. It is an investigative and prosecutorial agency. And so ACS is not the appropriate container or home for providing social support services and resources like family enrichment centers, child care vouchers, and all the other things they seek to do. Social support services and policing are different functions, and those functions are governed by different principles. And right now, we're conflating these two functions, and it's very dangerous. Parents understand this, and rightfully so, don't trust ACS. If we want ACS to function properly within the law, we must realign it with its core mandate and strip it of its social service add-ons. This does not mean families should not receive support. Families should receive support from community support.
30
Now on the
seconds.
front door, and the coalition co-chair recommends the city create new Office of Family Wellbeing to support community-led planning that supports families, builds up the community supports, and reduces the risk of child welfare involvement.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. Good afternoon. I'm Nora McCarthy, Director of the New York City Family Policy Project and member of the Narrowing the Front Door Work Group. Thank you for your attention to the issue of racial disparities in child welfare involvement. I want to add to Joyce's testimony about how we can, thank you, invest in a new approach so that fewer Black and Latino families in particular end up facing crises and ACS involvement. As you know, the Narrowing Group and the Innovation Team and the Mayor's Office of Policy and Planning have been planning a new approach to create an Office of Family Wellbeing that would anchor a community approach to family support. Thank you for your questions and comments about it earlier, and we heard the Commissioner's support. This fall, our group spent time listening to what parents say they need. Parents who rely on city programs and services report needing navigation support that is cross-agency, supportive, and peer-centered. The barriers they named included mistrust, stigma and shame, fear of judgment and consequences, including ACS involvement, and resource and time scarcity. The solutions they named included trusted messengers, peer-based models, neighborhood proximity, and proactive outreach. And word of mouth is how parents say they learn about resources through the people and organizations they trust, as you know. A neighborhood strategy that invests in grassroots organizations and the social fabric can ensure that families find the support they need and that crises don't build. A new city Office of Family Wellbeing can centralize and support family supportive programming, support community-led planning, create new restorative approaches to family safety that prevent and de-escalate family crises. build up networks of peer support to improve access to existing services and resources, and prioritize investment and capacity building in grassroots organizations that families trust. Moreover, we can invest millions in city savings from reductions in ACS spending from the drops that we heard about today. I want to invite all of you on this committee to a legislative breakfast next month to learn more. And we hope that this committee and your champions on the council more broadly will champion this plan for families. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I spoke to someone yesterday about the legislative breakfast. I believe it was your lobbyist, but yes, I look forward to hearing more about that
Great.
in the upcoming future. I do not have any questions for this panel, and thank you for submitting your questions for today's hearing.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. We're going to call the next panel.
The next panel will be Jesse McLaughlin, Fanta Marie Johnson, and Josiah Gilbert.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Fanta Marie Johnson, and I'm here to talk about the family Miranda rights. Thanks. Thank you to the chair and the council for convening this hearing on providing family Miranda rights and racial disparities in New York City's family policing system, sometimes referred to as the child welfare system. My name is Fanta Marie Johnson, and I am an impacted parent. I am here today to speak about the harm the family policing system has caused to me and my children, and to call for the passage of the city family Miranda. When my second son was born in December of 2019, we were drug tested at the hospital without my consent. When we tested positive for cocaine, the hospital reported me to ACS. I was unable to bring my little baby, who looked like the cutest old man who I named Papa, home from the hospital. When ACS came to my home, that's when my life changed forever. The caseworker did not tell me my rights, nor told me that I had the right to a lawyer. We need family Miranda because parents like me deserve to know our rights when an investigation begins. Had I been informed of my rights and received supportive services early, my son would still be in my care. At every stage of my case, like so many others, Black and Latin parents, ACS responses should have been better. I should have been asked, what can we do to support you? Pregnant women go through so much. I should not have to be feared or to fear to tell my truth to my healthcare professionals and ACS caseworkers for fear that my son should be taken out of my care. This system punishes Black families. I went to a mother and baby me program and tested negative for drugs and alcohol. For the 13 months while I was there, I received glowing reports from my service providers, yet my son was not placed in my care. Later, my third son was removed from my care after an individual, likely my husband, who had previously committed domestic violence against me, made a false report and manipulated me in the system. This time, I tested negative for all drugs and alcohol, but my son was not placed in my care. I've been sober for years. I finally have overnight visits with my third son, but it should have not taken this long. My son should have never been removed from my care. I'm fighting for my children, but I am not supported. I'm being punished. This system keeps Black babies and brown babies in the system to make money. What am I supposed to tell my sons when they grow up?
You can take your time. I'm not going to cut you off, but everybody else, you will be cut off, but you can take your time.
Thank you. I'm scared. They're going to become statistics. I'm their mother. I deserve to parent them. They deserve to be parented by me. I call on the city council to pass the city family Miranda and to end the practice of surveilling and separating Black and Latina families.
Thank you for sharing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for convening this.
You have to cut the mic on.
Thank you for convening this hearing. My name is Jessie McLaughlin, and I'm a staff attorney at the Bronx Defenders and a steering committee member of the New York Informed Consent Coalition. And I work with Fanta Marie on that coalition. Our coalition includes people impacted by the family regulation system, along with organizers, activists, doulas, physicians, nurses, social workers, public defenders, and civil rights and reproductive justice organizations. We support policies that improve prenatal care and birth outcomes and that prevent family separation. One of those policies is the Maternal Health, Dignity, and Consent Act, which would ensure consistent statewide application of clinical best practices by requiring informed consent before drug testing or screening a pregnant or postpartum patient or their newborn unless an emergency situation requires otherwise. I'm here to speak about the harms caused by the test and report practices in New York City hospitals, which lead to family separation. This practice disproportionately impacts Black and Latini families who are reported to ACS often when there's a positive drug test. We urge the council to invest in non-punitive and affirming care for pregnant and postpartum people with substance use disorders so that hospitals are places of care, not sites of surveillance. And we know that this works. Nora, who was on the panel earlier from the New York City Family Policy Project, has analyzed ACS data from 2020 to 2024. And that data shows that in 2020, when New York City Health and Hospitals began requiring providers to obtain informed consent before administering a toxicology test on a pregnant patient, an 80% drop in ACS investigations alleging parental drug use for mothers of newborns and a 90% drop for Black birthing people took place. A 37% drop in newborns removed by ACS for any reason, which meant that more newborns stayed at home with their families. And the data did not show that any negative impact on child safety from the reduced number of ACS investigations. So these results show that care, not punishment, is the path that we should be taking to support families. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Josiah Gilbert. Good afternoon. I'm the Client and Community Engagement Manager for the Legal Aid Society's Juvenile Rights Practice, and I'm here both as a professional working in the child welfare space and as someone who was once the subject child of an ACS investigation. When people hear the phrase child protective investigation, they often imagine help arriving at a family's door. But for many families, especially Black and Latino families, it feels far more like an interrogation. As a child, I watched the adults around me panic when ACS showed up, not because there was abuse, but because no one explained their rights. They didn't know what they could refuse. They didn't know when they could ask for a lawyer. They didn't know that saying yes to everything out of fear could permanently change their lives. By the time legal representation entered the picture, the damage was already done. That was my experience as a child, and it is an experience far too many families in this city know all too well. Children are removed, families are fractured, trauma sets in. In the criminal legal system, we understand a basic truth. Rights only matter if people know they have them. That's why Miranda warnings exist. But in the family policing system, where the consequences include family separation and lifelong trauma, parents are rarely informed of their rights at the outset. Instead, they are asked to open their homes, surrender private information, and make life-altering decisions under fear and confusion. Intro 449 is not about stopping investigations. It's about preventing unnecessary harm before the system starts grinding families down. If parents are informed of their rights early, before court involvement, before removals, families have a real chance to protect themselves and to ask for help. Because once a case enters family court, once children are removed, once trauma compounds, no service, no therapy, and no court order can undo that harm. As someone who lived through an ACS investigation as a child, I can say this plainly. Miranda-style notice for parents is not radical, it's humane, it's preventative, and it's long overdue. We'll also be submitting written testimony that further expands on these points. If the goal of this system...
Thank you. I don't have any questions for this panel. Thank you for your support on this legislation, and I look forward to continue working with you guys to get this passed. Thank you.
The next panel will be Neela Natarajan, Kearney Coughlin, Mark Papish, Shauna Egan, and Jenna Louder.
So, someone can start. Don't be.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Stevens, and member of the committee, for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Mark Papish, and I am the Supervisor of Government and Community Affairs at the Center for Family Representation. CFR is a public defender's office representing families investigated by ACS in Manhattan, Queens, Staten Island, and the Bronx. We have done so vigorously since 2003. As you have heard and will hear, the question of a disparate racial impact on communities and families of color by ACS and the family policing system is not up for debate. It is in fact borne out not just by the stats that we are now all used to hearing, but indeed by ACS themselves, with multiple former employees speaking out that they feel complicit in the harm that ACS can cause Black and brown families. Again, ACS work is racist, and this is not debatable. Under Commissioner Danhauser, ACS made efforts to reduce Article 10 filings, and yet I can tell you from the experience of our clients and staff that the reduced number of court filings and increase in cases placed on the CARES track did not result in any kinder or less racist treatment when facing an ACS investigation. ACS is at its core a policing entity. This cannot be changed. Indeed, even members of the NYPD are surprised by the sheer audacity of ACS investigations, with less than 0.2% of ACS investigations proceeding with warrants, signaling a commitment to potentially unconstitutional searches that is horrifying. Such radically racist and inequitable treatment of our clients and their families cannot be chipped away at. In a time of great strife, it's important that the city rise to the challenge by flipping the narrative on its head and standing with families. Per Chief Justice Rowan Wilson, New York State's top judge, these problems are not made by family court and cannot best be addressed by family court. Accordingly, CFR stands with impacted parents, our colleagues at other defender offices, and allies to say the following. The council should immediately pass the Family Miranda Rights Act. The courts have spoken loud and clear. They are not the fix for the issues facing our clients. The best way to keep families out of court is by educating them of their rights. Furthermore, the council must demand the future of ACS not be one of continued incrementalism, but rather one of true institutional change that will begin to address centuries of racism that is embedded at the core of the family policing system. And finally, I want to go on the record and say, we know that ACS is not in compliance with Local Law 29 of 2025, requiring them simply to give out our contact information. So, categorically, ACS cannot be trusted to weigh in on which rights should be required in a Family Miranda hearing. And we appreciate any efforts to hold them accountable to Local Law 29 and also respectfully request that they not be included in conversations about Family Miranda moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kearney Coughlin, and I'm a policy fellow at Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem. I want to thank Chair Stevens and this committee for holding this hearing. To address the harm of the family separation system, we have to reckon with its racist impact and implement real solutions. And this is why we must pass Family Miranda. I want to tell you about an NDS client who I will call Miss Knox. She's a pediatric nurse practitioner and a devoted mother to Ella, her 16-month-old, who was born premature and had respiratory and feeding issues. Miss Knox has been a fierce advocate for Ella to get the care she needs, strictly following the prescribed feeding plan and coordinating all the PT and OT visits that her daughter needs to thrive. Miss Knox was offered homemaking services through ACS, which she declined because she already has a visiting nurse and a home health aide who describes her as a wonderful mother. To understand what happened next, it is important that you know that Miss Knox and her baby are Black. ACS kept coming to her apartment, and Miss Knox kept telling them she was not interested. She brought Ella down to the lobby so the caseworker could confirm she was safe, but wasn't comfortable with the worker coming into her home or disrobing her baby or accessing her private medical records. For a month, ACS workers continued to harass her and spread rumors to neighbors and building management, just because Ms. Knox declined what ACS holds out to be a voluntary program. Eventually, ACS called in a case against her and got the court to order them access. It was only at this point that Ms. Knox was given a piece of paper with a number for legal assistance. Ella was ripped from her mother for a week, and during that time, ACS didn't take Ella to her medical appointments and didn't give her the prescribed formula that Ms. Knox provided. Ella lost weight and had multiple respiratory issues when she was finally returned to her mom. ACS dared to tell Ms. Knox that she was a poor mother, and then proved that they couldn't do half as good a job as her. This kind of treatment by ACS is all too common for Black and brown parents, who are villainized for protecting their families and knowing and asserting their rights. Ella was safe and well cared for until ACS took her from her mother. Family Miranda is needed to mitigate the racist harm ACS enacts on families, because respecting rights is part of what keeps children safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Sean Egan, and I'm the Policy Director for the Bronx Defenders Family Defense Practice. I want to thank Chair Stevens and the members of the committee for providing the opportunity to testify today. The most immediate step the Council can take to protect families from the racism of the family policing system is to pass the provisions in both Intro 449 and Intro 466 to ensure families can exercise their fundamental rights. The Commissioner stated ACS opposes Intro 449, which simply requires ACS to verbally inform parents of their rights to not consent to a search of their home or to force their child to speak to ACS, and that they have a right to an attorney. He suggested that this is because providing parents verbal warnings of their rights would give the impression that ACS is conducting a policing investigation where a final conclusion has been reached. I asked the Council to understand Bronx Defenders clients already experience ACS investigations as policing investigations where a conclusion to remove their children has been reached, or that it will be reached if they say just one wrong word. It has been 6 years since ACS was compelled to release an internal audit where ACS staff described ACS as a predatory system that specifically targets Black and brown parents and applies a different level of scrutiny to them, creating a system in where safety is a privilege of race and race is used as an indicator of risk. It is a true bare minimum for parents to be informed of their rights in the face of such a system. Consider two examples of Bronx Defenders clients' experiences from our 2025 report, This Wound is Still Fresh. On a Saturday in 2024, ACS separates a Black family, removing a 12-year-old from her mother and placing her in the Children's Center based on an allegation the child witnessed a fight between her mother and girlfriend. ACS does not file a case for 5 days, refuses to allow the mother to see her child the entire time. A case is filed in court on Wednesday, Bronx Defenders is assigned, and the family is quickly reunified after a week of family separation. In Thursday, 2023, a similar situation happens where a Latino father is told at his door that he must leave his home by ACS. He is informed court is not going to be held on Monday, but it is in fact held. And by the time he finally gets to court, it takes a week for him to be reunited with his family. The only thing that can be immediately done to prevent this from happening is to inform parents of their rights. So I asked the Council to pass Intro 449 and 466 immediately. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jenna Lauder, a policy counsel at the New York Civil Liberties Union. The NYCLU views family regulation as a core civil liberties issue that directly implicates the constitutional rights to equal protection, privacy, and family integrity, and undermines the promise of reproductive and racial justice. The family regulation system almost exclusively targets Black and brown families. This is by design. It was created as backlash to the civil rights movement, a tool to punish Black poverty, and stems from our country's legacy of devaluing Black motherhood. It also reflects a culture within ACS, as described by their own staff, that views Black families as inherently less fit and more suspect. Racial disparities deepen as a family regulation case progresses. This means that families of color are not only more likely to be reported, but also more likely to be treated as incompetent or blameworthy and suffer the most severe outcomes. ACS is fundamentally an investigatory and prosecutorial agency that puts families under a microscope and can have a profoundly destabilizing, devastating effect on their lives. Investigations and family separations inflict stress and trauma that do more to harm than to help children's well-being. The data bears this out. This punitive approach is especially unwarranted given that over 75% of ACS cases stem from circumstances related to poverty, not intentional maltreatment. These are loving, caring families that are being ripped apart. To genuinely improve child welfare, the city should immediately enact Intros 0449 and 0466 to ensure parents know their constitutional rights when government agents come to their door. Parents must be told their rights verbally in real time so they can make informed decisions in high-stakes moments. The city should also invest in programs like universal childcare, affordable housing, and cash assistance to help families break intergenerational cycles of poverty and trauma and truly thrive. ACS just acknowledged that parents fear engaging in services provided by an agency with the power to take their children away. This includes the CARES program. The city should disentangle resource provision from ACS and ensure that all families can freely access supportive programs with zero ACS involvement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Nila Natarajan, and I'm the Director of Family Defense and Policy at Brooklyn Defender Services. We thank the Committee on Children and Youth and Chair Stevens for this opportunity. As so many have named today, the deeply harmful impact of ACS investigations on families of color is well known and well documented. Brooklyn Defender Services Family Defense Practice is the primary provider of representation to families experiencing those ACS investigations in Brooklyn. Our offices collectively have represented thousands of families investigated by ACS and have assisted 85 to 90% of those families stay together and out of court. When families know their rights and are able to effectuate them, they stay safe and intact. We commend Chair Stevens and Councilmember Ung for sponsoring Introduction 449 and Intro 466, and deeply appreciate the Chair for bringing these vital bills before this committee. For nearly a decade, families who have experienced these investigations have asked for the provision of family rights at the first point of contact with ACS. This legislation was conceptualized and is now championed by the very families we are naming have been harmed by ACS's practices. Should this committee want to move our city beyond naming these harms and bring us to a place of action to empower and support families, it must continue to move this legislation forward. Intro 449 ensures that agents of ACS retain all existing legal authority to conduct investigations, while verbally providing parents with information and transparency they need to protect their families from any unlawful abuse of that authority. This is straightforward legislation, and it doesn't create any new rights. Ensuring that parents have knowledge of their existing rights during an ACS investigation will allow parents to make informed decisions for their family and minimize the harm of confusion of ACS investigation. Like in all other parts of life, better informed parents can make better decisions for their children. Given the current escalation in government surveillance and the increased fear of family separation amongst our city's most marginalized communities, it is vital that we immediately take action to protect family integrity. The last thing I'll note is we ask that Introduction 466 be amended to include the full provision of rights that's listed in 449, so the two bills parallel each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your support of the bill. We're working through this, and my hope is to get it passed. So thank you, and continue to work with you guys on your advocacy so we can get it passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll call the next panel.
The next panel will be Patricia Loftman and Tanisha Grant.
You have to press the button.
Yeah. I'm going to respectfully request some indulgence as a senior and a senior midwife. I'm going to be a little, just please. Good afternoon. My name is Patricia Loftman. I am a certified nurse midwife, the former director of midwifery service at Harlem Hospital, where I cared for Black and brown women, infants, and families for 30 years, specifically caring for women with substance use disorder in the early days of the crack epidemic. I am also a founding member of the New York City Mortality Review Committee in 2018 and was a member of the newly created New York City Council Maternal Health Steering Committee under the leadership of City Council Speaker Adrian Adams. Consequently, I have extensive experience on the issue of which I testify today. I speak in support of Intro 0424. While considerable information exists regarding ACS's historic negative impact on family separation and disintegration, not widely known is the role ACS family policing system contributes to maternal mortality and morbidity. The largest driver of maternal health in New York City is maternal illness, overdose, and suicide. Throughout chart reviews, ACS consistently appears to be a negative factor in the women's lives and subsequent death. Social and emotional stressors were key contributors to these deaths, including lack of housing, domestic violence, and involvement with child protective services. Based on the latest New York City DOHMH data, 1/3 of all women and birthing people who died from maternal death were CPS involved. The full breadth of ACS involvement and examination of intergenerational sequelae, including maternal death, is imperative to understanding the issue in a holistic way that results in data-driven, empathetic, and resource-rich change. Although the MMRC has repeatedly requested that ACS share its data with the MMRC, to provide the MMRC with information that would holistically enrich our analysis and recommendation, ACS has refused to share this data with the MMRC. Consequently, the members were alarmed to learn about the implementation of a yet-to-be-unveiled ACS DOHMH partnership under the banner of Early Childhood Partnership. A copy of the presentation is included. ACS will fund this over 3 years to financially support an expanded nurse-family partnership program. The issue is that as New York City Department of Health wants to encourage individuals to use the health system to improve their health, it cannot engage with a family policing system which has the potential to destroy clinician of women's relationships and prevent them from coming into care. I am hoping that you will absolutely read all of the information I am providing, because this now, in addition to family disintegration, we're now talking about maternal morbidity and mortality and the relationship.
Thank you. Thank you for this information.
To the Honorable Chair Stevens and members of the City Council Youth and Children's Committee. My name is Tanisha Grant, and I am an individual directly impacted by the child welfare system starting from my own birth. My organization, made up of lived experience experts and impacted people, and I stand in full support of Bill 449 and Bill 424. We also support a family engagement center that will really center the community inside of CORE. The family Miranda's rights as its principles should have long been codified within our city laws. Born 50 years ago, I was immediately separated from my biological family. I often pondered the consequences had my biological mother been aware of her rights. Perhaps circumstances would have differed, and I would have been spared the enduring harm resulting from separation from my family roots. The Family Miranda Right legislation is essential for protecting families today and acknowledging the insidious nature of tearing Black families apart. Chair Stevens, I cannot overstate the profound and lasting psychological and emotional damage inflicted on both children and parents when families are separated. This separation also frequently results in further institutional involvement across various agencies. Every agency has touched my life because I went from foster care to a failed adoption to back into foster care to the juvenile justice system. Again, I'm 50 years old. We are often treated as mere chattel within these systems, and families are frequently blamed for expressing natural distress and confusion that accompanies an investigation by the Administration for Children's Services. It is a fundamental human instinct for parents to defend themselves, often unaware that anything that they say will be used against them. As a former child of the system, this reality significantly influenced my own experience as a parent. My oldest child is 31, and throughout her upbringing, I endured multiple investigations. ACS investigators would request actions such as drug tests, framing them as a means to prove innocence against other unfounded reports. I lived in a constant state of defensiveness while raising my children, a vigilance that persists today concerning my grandchildren. Black families live in constant fear of ACS, perpetually focused on surviving the system. It is time for Black families to move beyond mere survival to thriving. This bill represents a crucial step towards restoring power to these families. In closing, finally, I wish to address the issue of co-option and inclusion regarding advocacy efforts. We dedicate considerable effort to providing support and developing innovative care models only to see our ideas consistently appropriated. Furthermore, we are often excluded from the resulting policy discussions, which demonstrates a profound disrespect for the work and lived experience of many impacted advocates striving to reform the system. Family enrichment centers serve as one example. I understand the committee supports these centers, but I have encountered a family enrichment center in Washington Heights that exhibits practices I would characterize as anti-Black. My assessment is based on being invited to events unrelated to Black culture. Specifically, they hosted a Dominican Heritage event, but failed to organize a Black History Month event during our 100th year anniversary of recognition. Given the disproportionate impact of child welfare on Black families, it is concerning that the agency lacks the accountability to ensure Black families feel genuinely welcomed. As an organization frequently denied funding, it is deeply disheartening to observe ACS and foster care agencies such as Children's Aid, who handled my adoption. The organization that handled my own foster care years ago continue to receive funding despite their role in perpetuating harm. I urge you to consider this reality while allocating funds to agencies and systems. And I'll say this last thing. You know me out there. You know that I work on the intersection of ACS and schools and how that harm perpetuates in schools. We don't get any type of support for it. And all those people that you said that set up here from ACS, I have never known or met with any of them. So when we talk about working with the grassroots, ain't no more grassroots than Tanisha Grant and Parent Support in Paris, New York. And this has affected my life for 3 generations. Please consider that. Thank you for listening to my testimony.
Thank you for sharing, Teresa. Thank you. I have no questions for the panel. This concludes the in-person portion of our public testimony. We now move to remote testimony. If you wish to testify remotely, please listen for your name to be called. Once your name is called, a member of the staff will unmute you. You may then start your testimony once the Sergeant of Arms sets the clock and cues you to begin. Who's calling?
Saiten Seiko, you may begin when the sergeant starts your clock.
You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Committee of Children and Youth. My name is Satan Sako, and I am the founder and executive director of TBS Charity Incorporated, a Queens-based nonprofit organization serving youth and families with limited or no support systems. I am here today to speak about the need for community-based after-school and emergency childcare services for children and youth ages 0 to 17 in Queens. Families across our communities prioritize their children's safety and well-being, yet many experience temporary gaps in care due to limited availability, inflexible program hours, or unexpected life circumstances. TBS Charity provides safe, structured after-school services and emergency childcare support designed to ensure children and youth remain in supervised, nurturing, and trusted environments during critical hours and transitional periods. Our programs support families who lack extended family or informal support networks and rely on trusted community-based care options. Our approach is family-centered, flexible, and trauma-informed, promoting stability for children and caregivers while supporting positive youth development. These services contribute to youth well-being, family stability, and community safety. I respectfully urge the Council to continue prioritizing investments in after-school and emergency childcare services for children and youth ages 0 to 17.
Thank you. Your time expired.
Sharmila Medirata, you may begin when the sergeant starts your clock.
You may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Stevens and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today. My name is Sharmila Medirata. I serve as Chief Wellness and Environmental Design Officer at Graham Windham, a nonprofit organization partnering with New York City Children and Families since 1806. We support more than 8,000 young people and their families across Harlem, Brooklyn, and the Bronx through mental and behavioral health care, academic and workforce success, co-created community-based supports, and foster care and preventive services. We are here today because racial disparities in New York City's child welfare system are real, persistent, and harmful. At Graham, we see daily how poverty, structural inequities, and trauma intersect with child welfare involvement, disproportionately impacting Black and Latino families. Addressing these disparities requires substantive investment in supports that reduce harm and strengthen families and communities. Intro 424 is a meaningful step in that direction, providing no-cost, trauma-informed mental health services when children return home is essential to stability and healing. Children who return home following removal carry significant trauma. Parents carry their own trauma from the investigation and removal as well. Healing must intentionally center both the child and the full family. When high-quality, culturally responsive care is consistently available to all, young people and their families are more likely to thrive. We strongly support Intro 449 and have supported the state version of the Family Miranda Rights Act of 2023. Together, these two proposals will help families and caregivers access understandable and actionable information in their own language about their rights and obligations in these pivotal moments, and equip families and caregivers to recognize and resist unlawful or unwarranted intrusion into their lives. As investigations disproportionately affect Black and Latin communities, codifying these protections is an important racial equity measure. These bills represent practical steps toward a child and family well-being.
Thank you. Your time expired.
Georgina Gooden, you may begin when the sergeant starts your clock.
You may begin.
My name is Georgina Gooden. I am a mother, a Brownsville community member, a graduate student, and the early intervention advocate with United for Brownsville. I am sharing my testimony as both a parent and an advocate who works closely with families, navigating systems that too often destabilize rather than support them. In Brownsville, the child welfare involvement is not an exception. It is a reality that changes the daily lives of families. In 2023, 1 in 7 families in Brownsville had an ACS case. That is compared to 1 in 20 citywide. This level of surveillance creates lasting fear and trauma in our community. Families live with constant anxiety that asking for help could lead to investigation, judgment, or separation. Parents also deserve to know their rights. Currently, families are not consistently informed of their constitutional rights when ACS initiates contact. Many parents do not know they have the right to speak with an attorney or even decline entry without a court order. Ensuring families are informed to protect their dignity, strengthens trust, and promote community fairness. Ending racial disparities in child welfare requires a shift from surveillance to stabilization. It requires investigating a preventative support that is not connected with ACS, stabilizing trusted community organization, and creating pathways for families to access help safely and without fear. The proposed Office of the Family Wellbeing should be a community-led, pursuing and resource grassroots that families trust. In a community gathering last November, Brownsville residents were asked what ideas they have to make a change in Brownsville. Some simple common sense solutions were community gardens for after school, yoga in the park, grants to the corner store laundromats that can support families to do their laundry. This proposed of
Thank you.
the
Your
office.
time expired.
Ruth Horry, you may begin when the sergeant starts your clock.
You may begin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Ruth Horry. I am a mother, former Brownsville resident, affected youth, and I have been working in Brownsville for the past 8 years alongside families navigating city systems. I'm here to speak about how ACS over-policing impacts families, particularly Black and Brown families in neighborhoods like Brownsville. My experience with ACS was not about protection, it was about surveillance. In 2012, I took in a child who had been removed from their home. After the biological parents learned my address, they began calling ACS repeatedly, sometimes 3 times a week. The pattern continued for 5 years. ACS kept coming. Even when allegations were unfounded, the investigations did not stop. My home was repeatedly entered into the system. My children were questioned, and our lives were disrupted over and over again. The agency that once protected me as a child became a source of harm for my own children. What should have been protection turned into chronic surveillance. When ACS shows up at your door, sometimes accompanied by police, it does not feel like help. It feels like enforcement. Families are rarely told they have rights. They are not told they can request a court order or consult an attorney. The interaction is framed as mandatory compliance. In neighborhoods like Brownsville, this is not rare. This is patterned. Nearly 45% of Black and Latinx children in New York will experience an ACS investigation by 18 years old. If we're serious about protecting children, then we need to stop responding to poverty with surveillance. I support the recommendation to create a new Office of Family Wellbeing that centers community-led planning, strengthens trusted neighborhood supports, and reduces the risk of unnecessary child welfare involvement before families ever reach a crisis point. Thank you.
Jennifer Nicole Alameda, you may begin when the sergeant starts your clock.
You may begin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer. I'm here today to assist with leadership for the parents. I myself am a parent. I humbly have 3 children that have been in the foster care system about 5 years now, humbly due to a medical accident of a concussion and memory loss, 12 months. So generally, the state took the children into care as the second parent. So that is not the issue. Thank you guys for everything you've done. As of today, February 2026, unfortunately, the children have been officially adopted. And we want to hopefully get the situation clarified. I submitted federal documents to the federal court, the judge for the family system, to have my children returned hopefully soon. I am your first federally trained female U.S. president. I've been here 9 years, assisting in the Senate Congress as an immigration defense. I here represent New York, the poor community. I am managed by the food stamps welfare system, and I assist with the White House as we speak every day on the news. So hopefully we can assist the foster care system in updating the laws in Congress that are more humane and helpful to keeping our children and families together. Thank you.
Christopher Leon Johnson, you may begin when the sergeant starts your clock.
Yeah, hello, Chair Stevens and the committee. My name is Christopher Leon Johnson. I'm here to support each and every last one of these bills, but I want to give my commendation to a state senator who has my state assembly district now, Jabari Brisport, but I'm not his constituent. I wish it was a state senator, Jabari Brisport, for having a bill that was passed by the governor to remove anonymous reporting when it comes to filing complaints with ACS, which will help out a lot of Black families, because anonymous complaints will always, if you had anonymous complaints, it hurt Black families. I hate anonymous things. But I think that you, Chair, Ms. Stevens, need to start working with the state and start pressuring the state. I know that the budget is over in the state, but I think next year's budget, you should try to get this into the state budget when it comes to bills like this, because in the city council, I don't think it's going to go through because they have the thing is that when it comes to like giving out the rights, I support the rights. We have the thing that the city council needs to start calling out is that the police, when they are with these ACS agents, and these ACS workers, they help them impede on people's rights. And I know that this police department is ran by Jessica Tisch, so they scared to piss off Jessica Tisch, and our mayor is scared of pissing her off. So this is going to be a big time hurdle when it comes to stuff like this, because the main start when it comes to rights being impeded are with the NYPD. I know that this example does not relate to children and youth, but there's a lot of children and youth when they off their days, they don't pay their car fare on the buses. But when Eagle Team start checking for tickets for kids, youth probably under 24 years old, the police be right there with them, and it's a thing that's called false imprisonment. And the cops, if they're there, they be impeding those kids' movements when they don't pay their fare, and that creates a problem. And that's a thing. The city council need to. I think next time.
Thank you. Your time expired.
I know. Can we get 30 more seconds, please? When they
30
have
seconds.
30 more seconds. So when they have a city council going forward, need to have a hearing with the NYPD, ask them like, well, why do you guys work with the Eagle Team to impede children's movements? This really the same thing when it comes to ACS. Why do you help the ACS violate the parents' rights when it comes to accessing their homes and not allowing them their rights? So thank you so much and enjoy your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it. And just so you know, I'm working very closely with Jabari on a lot of these issues. So thank you for bringing that up. We'll continue to monitor that.
I'm going to call the remainder of Zoom registrants. Amy Donahue, Lettuce Lane, Norma Ginez, Akila Matland, and Henry Robinson. Not seeing them on Zoom, I'll turn it back to the chair to close out.
If there's anyone present in the room who hasn't had the opportunity to testify but wish to do so, please raise your hand. Great. Seeing there no one else who wishes to testify, I would like to take this time to adjourn this hearing. Thank you all for attending, and I look forward to continue to monitor the situation to ensure that there's true equity within the child welfare system.